Well, hello, hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers. I'm your host, David the Skeptic, and I'm joined by a crew of parents, calling all parents. Matthew, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. I've just come back from a family breakaway, and this is my happy face.
Okay. Andrew.
Yo, yo, what's up? Hey, kids.
Okay. Another questionable introduction. And Teddy.
Hello, everyone.
Can't believe that Teddy is the most normal so far. All of these people are here because all of these people are parents. And I had on invite a couple other people, one of which was a parent Christian whom I very much respect, but I'm not even going to mention his name because he didn't show up. Take that, Russell. Wait a minute. Edit. And also Brian with a Y. I don't feel like he's stabbed me in the back by not showing up and leaving me to figure out what I'm going to do with this show by myself without any notice. I don't feel like that at all. We're good, buddy. Don't you worry about it. So what we have are these three extremely qualified people and me. And I got to tell you, audience, I came about as close as I will ever come and not do it to recusing myself from this podcast altogether. If we had the full crew, when I first devised the show, I asked David Russell if he would moderate it because I didn't even want to be on it. Why don't I want to be on it? Because I'm not a parent. And I didn't want to do this show with someone who wasn't a parent because I think the subject is too important. That said, there is a perspective that I will offer. So I almost think that this is podcast malpractice for me to be on the show, but I'm going to do it. Also, I have been a foster parent once upon a time, and so I guess that gives me entrance into the show. But without much further ado, I want to go ahead and jump right into the topic of parenting. You'll notice that there are no cute little titles when you read the blog post. It's just parenting. Because enough said. So before I jump in, does anyone have anything they would like to say, any thoughts bubbling at the top of your mind before we get to the conversation proper? Anything like an opening idea that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll jump in with something very quickly. There was back a while when I was still a Christian, and a pastor who I respected greatly did a church service, and he preached about parenting. And I think one of the, I was going to say throwaway comments. It wasn't really a throwaway comment, but it was an incidental comment. It said, if you want to learn about yourself, become a parent. And I think there's a lot of truth in that little nugget. But the thing that I want to build on from that is becoming a parent changes you, and it changes you in ways that are unpredictable and unexpected. Nobody becomes a parent knowing what that is going to do to them or the effect that that is going to do to them. And there are psychological things that change in you as part of this responsibility of becoming a parent. And I know some people like to make a religious connection on that. I obviously deny that there's any religious connection to that, but and some of these things are unexpected and we have zero control over them. And just to follow it on with an example, for me personally, becoming a parent meant I was no longer able to read about crimes against children. It's a very simple, and I know I'm not unique in that specific effect. Before I became a parent, I could read a newspaper article and read about a horror that a toddler might have gone through as part of any kind of experience, and it wouldn't deeply affect me. Obviously, I would be concerned, and I would be, and it would affect me in the same way as any murder or any other bad news story would. But becoming a parent meant that reading that kind of article became viscerally painful for me because I immediately projected my own child into that position. And that mental act became so excruciatingly painful. I could no longer read news articles that involved crimes against children. I could no longer watch the news which involved crimes against children because of that projection. And that was a completely unexpected experience to me. And I know, again, I know I'm not unique on that. So I just like to lay that out on front. So I think everything because from that moment, that affects all your decisions that you make about your child, that you make about other people's child. And so I think that just sets the scene for your entire life as a parent after you've had that kind of change in mindset.
Andrew, I know that you're not going to let your co-host outdo you with a statement. And so I am going to call on you next.
So Matthew's absolutely right. Those sorts of news stories, they hit far too close to home these days. So I'm going to change the tone a bit because this could get maudlin way too early, and a parenting conversation should at least go 7 or 8 minutes before maudlin sets in.
Well, maybe you should go after me because I have a rather maudlin statement too.
So let me just try to lighten the mood up. So last night, I was watching a mixed doubles Olympic match between a Dutch team and a team from Japan, and it was a great match, right? So you got these mixed doubles. The teams are very energetic. The trouble is, it was Olympic badminton. I kid you not. It's Olympic badminton. So here's what I want to know. If you're a parent and your child makes it to the Olympics, right? And their lifetime goal has been to play badminton in the Olympics. When they bring their gold medal home, do you hang it on the refrigerator before you put it in the scrapbook, or do you put it in their scrapbook right along with their Scooby-Doo lunchbox? Because badminton should not be an Olympic sport.
I, for one, am glad that badminton has finally gotten the recognition it deserves. Teddy?
It actually was a great game. Teddy, it's up to you.
I can't hear you, Teddy. You're muted.
I was going to say, can I just say that's the one sport I've always been really good at because there's so much reaction time with that little birdie.
Right. I could play badminton a little bit.
I like tennis.
It's called a shuttlecock.
Right. I mean, you've got all that reaction time. I mean,
you're just playing it wrong if you think you've got that much time to respond to it.
Maybe I am, but I like how I play it. I get that rally. I kind of have Teddy's rules. Same thing with tennis. You can have the ball bounce more than once and it can come to me instead of me going to it.
Well, you're talking to a person who plays volleyball with a beach ball. The bigger, the better. So I'm with you, Teddy.
I just got seriously a shuttlecock.
Look, that's such a cool name.
No,
it's such a cool name, shuttlecock. I'm not even gonna. You know what? It just satisfies all types of people, whatever your mindset is.
It's badminton. Badminton
for those who are bad to the bone. Teddy, did you have
just keep going there.
That's why I'm glad badminton is an Olympic sport.
I feel that we need a pronunciation lesson here. It's badminton.
No.
It's got a t in it. It's got a t that you actually pronounce and enunciate.
It's duh. It's actually, isn't it badminton?
No, it's badminton.
Badminton?
Yeah, it's like internet.
Is that like aluminium?
Badminton.
Only
you guys are just adding syllables to things randomly at this point.
Look, they spell program with an E on the end.
Like Britain. You don't say Britain. Britain.
No, we say
badminton. Britain.
Britannia.
Britain.
So Teddy, save us with
This is
something
going to
useful
get
about
ugly
parenting.
very, very quickly if you guys
Just-
don't pull your shit together. I tell you.
it's going to be that kind of show. This is what happens when you
smack your heads together, like my parents used to say.
Teddy, you have 7 more seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to make my opening statement and move on with the show.
Well, I think parenting is one of those things where, you know, as you said in your write-up, anybody can be a parent, but there's such a responsibility to parenting, and I don't know that everybody takes it as seriously as they should. And I think sometimes people feel a societal pressure to become parents. And I don't think society should pressure people to become parents, because to do parenting properly, it's hard. You're giving up a lot of your time and effort and money, and there's a lot of sacrifice, and you need to be prepared to sacrifice. And I see little kids having babies, and they have no idea sometimes, you know, what they're getting into. And some of them want to have babies at a young age, and they have no idea what kind of demands that is going to take on their time if they are actually going to be the one parenting, as opposed to just giving their kid off to the grandparent to raise. And so I think that sometimes people, you know, need to see parenting as not so much only the fun parts that accompany it, but also the work and the duty. And a kid isn't just an accessory. It's a kid is the focus of your life, and everything revolves around the child. And if that's not the case, I mean, we're just about everything. I mean, but that needs to be the central focus, I think, and the efforts going into that. But a friend of mine, I remember many years ago, before I was a parent, she had said that being a parent will be your greatest joy and your greatest heartache. And that is because you put so much love into your child, and it's a natural thing. And parents that don't have that love, that's unnatural. And sometimes that occurs, but that's an unnatural thing. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
So we're gonna pick up the conversation, Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
Own your thought. I just want to say first, actually, just 2 little notes that are off topic. If I seem uncomfortable, it's not because of the subject matter, although that makes me uncomfortable too. I've got this cough again, which is no good, and my house is full of bug spray because it's full of bugs, and I happen to be stuck in it. And there's only one window I can open, so I've got fans on and such. But I'm dying from, you know, the thing that I'm trying to kill bugs with. So there's going to be a lot of that, and probably not a lot of me muting my mic. So apologies there. The second thing is, for those of you who are used to seeing me with an eye patch, and you haven't seen that for a while, I'll just explain it really quick. I was going to screw with the audience for a while with that, but there may not be a while. So as you can easily tell, I have a very heavy nystagmus. My eyes float. Float is a kindness to what my eyes actually do. They dance drunkenly, uncontrollably. Now, I don't see it. So if you're wondering if things are always moving around for me, no, they're not. My brain has learned to compensate, though, so things are quite still for me. But they can be quite distracting for people who are talking to me, which is why I don't make eye contact. I literally can't make eye contact, except for a few seconds at a time. So the best thing I can do is to look at things intentionally with one eye. when I do that, the other eye just goes lazy and flops over to a side. You see that happening. So that's something that I'm extremely self-conscious about. But in these last few episodes of Skeptics and Seekers, I just haven't given enough of a damn to worry about it. What's that?
Good for you.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I ask people to come on the show, and I never tell people they have to turn on the camera. People can feel, turn it on or not turn it on, but I feel like I need to set an example. If I'm going to do the show, do a video podcast, I should just do it and be who I am. And so I assure you guys, I'm not drunk or high, which is what every doctor asks first when I go in there. You can't imagine how tiresome that can be. You go into a job interview and, anyway. So that's a couple of programming notes. Back to the parenting conversation. There were a couple of revelations for me. First of all, foster parenting is slightly different from non-foster parenting. I describe foster parenting as parenting on crack. It's hard because you're taking a child that you did not have from the beginning, and you're taking a child with a lot of issues, a lot of really deep, bad issues. And there really is no such thing as a child in foster care without issues. And some of them have really bad ones. They come from really bad situations. And so whatever you think you are as a parent, you're a better option than what a child in foster parent has right now. And so the state, as stringent as they are about foster parenting, they will practically accept anybody, because you are better than what they are coming from. And they just need you for a little while to give that child some form of safety and stability while they find a permanent solution. It's hard for the foster parent because what foster parents have to do is guard themselves against forming attachments. So they have to be parents, but they can't form this kind of parental bond because it's not your child. And the deal going in is that just when you've got things going and you feel like a family, someone comes and takes them away and puts them in a place that's worse than yours. And you got to grin and bear it, because that's the deal. It's very hard. So I learned some things about myself in that process. One of the things that I learned about myself is that I'm a shitty human being. And I don't say that for laughs. I thought that I was a slightly better person than I turned out to be. I'm the kind of person where everyone says, "Oh, you'd make such a great parent. How come you don't have kids?" I didn't necessarily have a good answer for that question at the time, but now that I've had the experience of being a parent for a short time, when people tell me, "Man, you would make such a good parent," my desired reaction is just to look at them and say, "Shut the fuck up," because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I would not make a great parent. I've been there. I've done that. Yes, I did my job as a foster parent, but I learned where almost all of my problems are. I learned it really fast, really harshly, and so that's one of the things that I learned about myself. The other thing that I learned is that maybe it's different with biological parents, but not everyone has a parental instinct. And what some people might suggest is, yeah, well, when the situation is upon you, you'll have that parental instinct. Again, shut the fuck up. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's not true. There are plenty of parents, in fact, that I know who have children that they gave birth to themselves, even mothers who simply don't seem to have that magical parental feeling that people always talk about. And if you think that, you know, you're going to get some kind of magical bond, you know, that's going to take you through this parenting process when you have kids, that is just not true. I suspect that the people who have that already have it. They're born with it. It's a part of the human condition, but it's not true of all humans. And it doesn't matter what you know, how cute your baby is or what the situation is. You're never going to feel that thing that parents are talking about, the special bond. And I can tell you, as a foster parent, for me, every day was work. And it was hard, and it was a job. It was an unpaid job. I didn't resent it because I signed up for it, but I kept waiting for this thing that would make me feel some kind of paternal instinct, and it never happened. I've got pictures of my foster kid still that float up in my library every now and then, and it's hard for me to look at them because I feel so unworthy. I felt for, well, probably the first time in my life, what people know of as the Imposter Syndrome. Because here I'm playing the role of a parent, but I never felt it. And to be perfectly honest, when that time was over, all I felt was relief. And I'm one of the good guys. A lot of people walking around with kids feel the same way, that they don't get a chance to be relieved of that responsibility. And I feel a kind of a connection with bad parents, because they probably either they didn't want kids and oops, or they thought they wanted kids for social reasons. They found out, you know what, this was a bad idea. But you don't get to have a do-over, you know, and you just got to live with it for the next 18 years at least. And so I got a sense of this job from the perspective of a person who was unqualified for it when he started and never became qualified for it through the process. And so where I kind of want the conversation to go next is for the group to share something kind of personal, which is, why the hell did you become a parent? Why? And in general, why do you think we do it as a species? I'll just start off and say, I was married to someone at the time, not my current wife. This is not my my first rodeo, but I was married to someone at the time who couldn't have kids, and they desperately wanted to have kids, and I wanted that for them. And we had been talking about adoption and foster parenting, you know, since we met. So, and also, I guess there was enough of a push within me to think, well, you know, surely I could do this. I mean, idiots become parents. I see them every day. I see them at church. They're really bad at it. I'm smarter than them. I could do this. In other words, all of the reasons for doing it were really bad for me. They were terrible, and I don't mind admitting it. I'm ashamed of it, and I may not look ashamed, but I am. And since we're talking about this on the show, I will just acknowledge I did not have a good reason for wanting to do this. And I can't even claim that I had this strong biological urge for procreation or anything like that. So I just want to pick up with Matt, who I bet had pretty good reasons. Why did you become a parent, and why do you think people do it in general?
I became a parent extremely reluctantly. My wife and I married very young, in our early 20s, and we waited pretty much 10 years before having our daughter. So easy maths, we're both now early to mid 30s when we had our daughter. And I think that's a more sensible route to take personally, because we're older and wiser. I know some people take a slightly different view, that they in the 20s is better, you've got more energy, and when you're older and you can be looking after your grandchildren, you're relatively younger and you can do a better job. I think both arguments work, and I'm not really going to say either one is better than the other. I think for me, this way worked better for us. But no, I was very happy to consider a married life without children. And so I was quite reluctantly encouraged to have children or have the one child. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore my daughter. I wouldn't change anything to be without my daughter. And I would literally move heaven and hell for the benefit of my daughter. You know, she is, to use the well overused phrase, the apple of my eye. I absolutely adore her. So don't misinterpret or misunderstand anything what I said. I would have been very happy to have been a childless husband for the entirety of our marriage. Yeah, but things change, the desires change, and sometimes in a marriage you have to have conversations which are difficult, which are challenging, and sometimes, you know, one parent is more enthusiastic about being a parent than the other. But my mind changed, and you know, I got used to the idea of becoming a parent. And from the moment it became apparent we were having a daughter, I was very happy about it. Like I say, I absolutely adore. So my story is probably slightly different to what you were expecting, David. But yeah, but I would just like to flag something. I don't know if we're going to go there in this conversation, so I'd just like to flag up something just in case we circle back to it later. I did get called selfish and other things for daring to be a Christian and be childless in excess of a couple of years into our marriage. And I would just like to say to any listeners of a religious persuasion, don't do that to newlyweds. Just don't.
I second that.
Thank you, Teddy.
Yeah, I felt that too, Matt, a little bit, but the reason it didn't sting for me so much is because I was selfish, and I knew it going in. And so I was just kind of waiting for the thing that would make me less selfish, because, you know, it's the magic of parenthood. And now you're magically not selfish anymore. Well, that's not true.
No, it doesn't work like that.
So, but for someone whom it surely has worked like, Andrew, why did you have a child? Why did anyone say yes to, anyway, why did you have a child? That was an unfair question. Just take that back. Why did you have a child, and why do you think in general people do this?
So when this is over, you and I'll have a birds and bees talk about the yes part of this. Really that works.
I've been looking forward to that because I never got that talk.
Will it have visuals?
Just point me to a website.
You got me. So why did we have a child? I think part of a couple's relationship, when you live in a society like we have, we're all very social creatures, and you see other couples have children, and you see that their child is something like them. You see the traits of the mother and the father blended into this other being. And you see them raise that child, and you see them do things that you think you can do, that they do well. And you see things that you think they do that you can do better, or maybe even, and hopefully not very often, right, Teddy, but sometimes we see things that parents do wrong. And we want not only to do better for that child, but we think if we had a child of our own, we would do better at raising that child. And there is this drive that has some some sense to it that says we want to share something very intimate and personal. And I guarantee you there's nothing more intimate and personal than a child. And there's a desire to take the parts of you that you think are good and pass them on with the best of your partner. And in some way, that's how we live forever. Why did I say yes? I only said yes to a biological child. We discussed foster parenting. We discussed adopting. So most of the listeners know that I'm visually impaired. And I thought, like you, David, if I adopt, if I foster, I'm going to have the problems that those other parents passed on. And if I'm going to have a child, then the child that I want is one that has the problems that I know how to deal with. So had my daughter had the eye trouble that I had, she doesn't, she's perfectly okay. But had she had, I wanted her to have the kinds of problems that I was prepared as a parent to deal with. And I can say, having fostered, I can say that I feel differently about my biological daughter than I felt about my foster child that I still love dearly. But there is a difference. And whatever you think about fostering, it is very possible that I don't know, not everyone has biological children and just love all of a sudden being a parent. I did. So why did I say yes? Because it's deeply personal. It's deeply intimate. We see things that we want to do better. We want to share something with the other person that frankly, there's only one way to share. And that's to have a child and give it a try. Is it hard? It is so hard. And I wouldn't change a thing. Sorry for the monologue. That's what I've got.
Teddy, why'd you have kids? I mean, especially you. I mean, the rest of us, we're underachievers. You, on the other hand, are a practicing attorney, and this surely was your goal from, a long time ago. So why would you, with goals and life and all that, want to mess it all up by having kids?
Well, that's part of the reason why I waited. I was 38 when I was pregnant, and it was quite deliberate when I decided to get pregnant. It was, no accident. And prior to that, I, was very, very careful to be sure I did not want any surprises. And so, one of the things that I learned early on from my parents is to learn from other people's experiences and learn from other people's mistakes, but also from their experiences. And not that parenting is a mistake. I don't mean to imply that. But for example, when you hear your friends talking about how, oh gosh, ever since I became a parent, I have no time for myself. My freedom is gone. Well, that tells you, when you become a parent, you don't have the flexibility and the freedom that you used to have. So the message is, if you still want that freedom, you might not want to be a parent. It might be best if you value being a good parent and you value having freedom, then the two really don't intersect very well. So I took that lesson to heart, and I waited until there was a time when I felt that was a better chance. And, being a female, there's that biological time clock that is ticking, as Marissa Tomei so eloquently put in My Cousin Vinny in the movie with the foot stomping. So, females, we can't just wait forever. And so I was hitting the top end of the time clock. So it was kind of, fish or cut bait. And I felt that I would regret not having a child if I did not. And the reason why I felt that I would regret it, I was not one of, I have friends who, from the time they were little children, little girls, they just wanted to become moms. And I was not that little girl. I was not the little girl. I mean, I guess when I was really, really young, I had my dollies a little bit. I wasn't even much with dolls or toys. I was more with arts and crafts. But there's some girls that are just all about being a mother. And that wasn't who I was. I was more about a career. But I still have a mothering instinct, and I've always had that. And I grew up in a family where there was such a tight bond between my parents and me, and my extended family and me. My grandmother lived in the house with us. My Uncle Ted is like a second father to me. My father died when I was 16, but even before my father died, my Uncle Ted was always very, very close in my life, like a second father, just from early on. And so I always had such a tight bond with my family. And my Uncle Ted was my educator. He would frequently help me with my math homework. He would teach me how to play chess and parcheesi, and he would teach me how to play tennis. And he would talk to me. He was an engineer, and then later on became a stockbroker, and we'd be in the car taking me places, and he would tell me about the stock market and teach me things. And it was just this incredible relationship and bond. And my mom and I, we had a different sort of relationship, but equally as tight. Hers was educating me in terms of just humanity in different ways. And just the mother-daughter closeness and doing things and going places. And I wanted to have that experience for myself with a child. And so that was the reason for wanting to have a child. I didn't want to lose out on my experience to be a teacher to my child. And I've had the great privilege of doing that with my son. And those have actually been some of the most beautiful times that I've had with my son, where, especially when he was younger, teaching him things like his alphabet, the numbers, how to read, math skills, things like that. And there's just sometimes there's this amazing bond between a parent in the teacher role and their child. And as you watch them bloom, and there's something that is so amazing when you start to see them get it, as they start understanding. And for example, as he starts understanding the math and he's starting to memorize it, you start seeing him getting excited about it, and then you see this enthusiasm and this, you know, and then you know, oh, he's got it now. He's got mastery over it. And when you see that effervescence, there's just nothing more beautiful than that. And when you see them just excel at something like that, and children excel at different things and with different things, and there's such great beauty in that, and all children are capable of different types of excellence, and we as parents are able, if we work with our kids, to draw out different types of excellence from our children when we work with them. And so that was the reason why I wanted to have kids, because I felt that if I didn't, that I would miss out on that experience. And I'm really glad. It's hard work. It's not just unicorns and rainbows, but in my experience, anything that's worth having tends to be a lot of hard work. There's no free lunch. There's no free lunch. You gotta pay for those good things. And so, what is it? The ripest fruit is usually furthest out on the branch. So, that's how it goes.
So I might revisit some of that later. And Teddy, I know that you might, there might be a situation where you want to leave the show early. I do want to get to some theological bickering, but I'm saving that for last. So
I'm sure I'll probably be staying for that too.
If anyone thinks that I can have a talk like this without some theological bickering, you have not been paying attention over the last 3 years. But there are some things I want to make sure that we cover first before we devolve into madness. All shows devolve into madness enough times. So,
be skeptics and seekers if it didn't.
F you. It's an inside joke, people. Just don't worry about it. So I had a oh my god, what have I done moment in parenting, and it happened fairly early on. And so I want to hear kind of some of your oh my god, what have I done moment. Did I make a mistake? Or just something that happened out of left field that you were not expecting, no one told you about, it wasn't in any parenting book. And I get a feeling that parents, people who are veterans of the Parent Club have these things that they purposely don't talk about so they can laugh at new parents when it happens to them. And so I will tell you about one such moment for me. And it was definitely an oh my god, what have I gotten myself into moment. And I'm not sure I ever recovered from that actually, but we picked up our son. He's a 3-year-old, and he had various issues. He could talk a little, but not well. A little bit. Had bladder issues and things like that. So he's still wearing diapers and that sort of thing. A great starter kid for the inexperienced. And so we go to McDonald's because, of course, as a new parent, those golden arches, they make so much sense at that point. So that's where we went, got our Happy Meal, and our son, we'll call him Ryan, just so that I can give a name here. He's like, I gotta go pee, and I'm like, okay, the bathroom's that way. This was and my wife is like, no, you have to take him into the bathroom and you have to help him. What? So, okay, well, how tough can this be? So I take him by the hand and we go to the bathroom and I shove him toward the urinal, which of course he's too short for. And so we have more problem. And I'm like, okay, all right, I see what I've got to do. I've got to pick you up. All right, so I've got him hoisted and he's still not quite getting the job done. And so it's like, you got to help. Well, so I find myself helping him get his pants down, and now I've got my hand on his penis, and I'm holding it with one hand, and I'm aiming him like a squirt gun with the other hand, and I'm not doing a real good job. And I think if someone walks in here, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to go. This is it for me. This is how it ends. And it was a very bad moment. It did not work out well at all. No, things didn't work well at all. And so I got him down as quickly as I could and got his pants up, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm the one who's got to wash my hands. He didn't really do anything. So I came out of that bathroom, went back to the table, and I've never been the same person since. Also, I have never taken him to a bathroom since. It was just my wife. I can't do that. I'm so bad at that. There's no manual. I don't want to practice. That's not my thing. So,
sitting options are available,
Yeah, no, I understand that. It was just one of those moments where I realized, oh, this parenting instinct has not happened yet.
They make stools for children, dude. I mean, I don't.
I don't even want to talk about it. It scarred me. And I'm sure he hasn't gotten over it yet either. So, but fortunately, me holding Ryan with one hand and using him as a super soaker with the other didn't land on anyone else. So, anyway, that was a moment. Have either of you had a moment as a parent that no one warned you about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go for Andrew.
Okay. All right. So last summer, my daughter just turned 1. She was an early walker. She was walking at 8.5 months, and some of you have seen the videos. By a year old, she could run completely unassisted, perfectly competently. She didn't trip, she didn't fall. She's very coordinated child. And so we took her for the first time to a friend's house. They have a pool, and we went over to cook out with them, and we did all the right things. We thought we'd done all the right things. By the way, no children were injured in this remainder of the story. So there's not a drowned child at the end if you're reaching for the pause button. So we talk about how we're going to manage her at the pool long before we ever go. We have a U.S. Coast Guard certified life vest for her. We had a rule that whichever one of us is watching her, if she has to be, if we have to go do something, she has to be directly handed off to another adult. Another adult has to always be directly responsible for her. There's no such thing as general supervision at the pool, right? And we thought this was completely adequate. We thought we really had this thing nailed down. So we get to the pool, And we're hanging out on the patio, and for this brief period, Allison and I are both in the pool with the baby, and she's climbing up out of the shallow end and going around this handrail that splits the stairs, so you can go in on the left and the right of this handrail. She'd climb up out of the pool, go around the handrail, and climb back in, going back and forth between us. Well, and that was working great. So we're both in the pool taking care of the baby, and we think we have really nailed this thing down, right? We've got this parenting thing down like nobody else. And then our friend lit the barbecue grill. And the barbecue grill is on the patio, not behind a fence, not behind a gate, not up on a deck. No, it's on the patio by the pool. No problem. The baby never leaves our side, except this one time. Mom and Dad are both in the pool. She climbs out, sees the barbecue grill, and takes off for that barbecue grill. No rhyme, no reason, no explanation, but she's got to investigate it. Unfortunately, it hadn't been lit very long. But she makes it to the barbecue grill and gets both hands on this lit grill. Now, the lid was closed, so it's hot. It causes her hands to be red. But that was a moment. It was a moment when you think, I've done everything as right as I can do it. We've talked about everything we can talk about, and we've got the plan in action where, we've got things under control. And children will do things that completely confound your wildest expectations. And had that grill been lit for another 5 or 6 minutes, right? She might have been burned quite badly. Unfortunately, she's a very coordinated little kid. She put her hands on the grill, it felt hot, she backed away. But there it was. And it was a moment where for a few minutes we thought we were really good parents. And there was this thing that part of her behavior that we just didn't account for. And, it was a learning lesson. We're better now than we were then. But children will confound you. They will do things that you just don't expect. And no perfect parents.
Yeah, it's the moment when you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't have left the Ginsu knives on the counter.
Well, it's a moment where you think this job is bigger than I thought, and it's I don't know. Do either of you, Teddy, Matthew, you've had those experiences because you got kids. So you've had that kind of experience. Do you have words for that moment where you think, I'm doing this parenting thing pretty well, only to reach that almost catastrophic next moment? And I can't describe the mood change. I have no words.
Yeah, at multiple points throughout my experience, I had one moment where we were at one of those bring and buy places in a hall with sort of no doorman or no protection, etc. And we literally turned around for half a second, and our toddling daughter had walked across the hall out the front door. And by the time I'd realised she was no longer in the hall, she was practically the other end of the car park. And fortunately, another parent had seen her grabbed by the hand and assumed correctly that she belonged to somebody in the hall. And when I got to the front door, there was somebody else holding my daughter's hand, walking her back towards the front door. And you get those moments, and it can change a contented environment into an emotion of sheer and utter blind panic in the smallest of moments. And yes, you're going to have more of those, Andrew. We've as listeners of Andrew's and my podcast know, my daughter is a teenager now, but we have a family tracking app, so each member of the family knows where the others are, and we use it on a regular basis just to keep tabs on each other and just to check if I'm driving home, my wife can see when she's expecting me home, and it's useful for practical things like that. And we'll use it occasionally if we're out and away somewhere and my daughter wants to go somewhere on her own, and we'll just say be at so and so place and such time, but we'll check in occasionally just to make sure that she's okay and she's where we expect her to be. But as is the nature of these kinds of things, relying on the GPS network, sometimes there'll just be a blip in the satellite signal, and it will very temporarily place a location a couple of miles away, just out of a sheer technical anomaly. She's perfectly safe, she's where we expect her to be, but the GPS for a brief moment reports something completely different. And little moments like that, and we've had probably half a dozen of them now, they instigate exactly the same really uncomfortable feelings of panic, especially if that blip happens to make it land at a major intersection or road, because all the worst things go through your mind in that moment. And yeah, you will have some more of those, Andrew. Just prepare yourself for them and
oh well, I've had
plan
two
for what
kids
you're
before
going to
this.
do. You know, it's
I've had kids before this. It's yeah.
And the comfort that I take from that is that immediate reaction just goes to show how much you care about the job that you're doing. And I'm less concerned about people being perfect parents than I am about parents actually caring about the well-being of their offspring and caring about trying to do a good job. I think you can be a less than perfect parent, but actually try hard. And I think that is better than a parent, no matter how good they are, who just simply doesn't care. Because I think that's the worst place to be, really. And it's those parents that bother and concern me more than anything else.
Teddy, do you have any of those moments where the wheels came completely off for you and you had a oh my goodness moment, or maybe one that you don't mind sharing? You probably have a lot of them, so you might want to you just sift through and see if there's anything shareable in there.
The oh my goodness moment just kind of is just always there, in that I suppose just from a personality perspective, I've got a people pleasing mentality, to where I always wanted to please my parents and just please people, make them happy. And I mean, I'll butt heads with people, that's different, but in terms of debating things like that. But I
was just thinking, I'd like to meet this people-pleasing Teddy.
I am.
Can we get her on the show sometime?
But we're always in a debate context. But I am a people pleaser, and it's a lot of times to my detriment. But of my son, he's got the hard head, and is likes to test his parents, and so that can be very challenging, and that is on a continuous basis. But fortunately, as he has been maturing, that has been getting much better. And I expect that with further maturity, that will get better too. But it's just, I guess it's just a difference in personality. But I guess I expected a little Teddy that would. I was hoping for a little Teddy. It's like,
I'm going to not have a tongue as much as I'm biting.
Well, I mean, that's perfect. I mean,
I need to mute my mic for a while. There's so many responses that come to mind that are not appropriate here.
It's like,
okay. So, I want to go to a place that's a little bit less comfortable. I want to talk about um, blame, self-blame, and real blame. I want to talk about or get some commentary on how much of what happens, the kind of adult your child turns out to be, how much of that is on you as a parent? How much do you feel that it's on you? Do you ever, are you concerned with the direction that your kids are going? Do you blame yourself if they seem to be going in the wrong direction? Or is there a point to where, kids are independent human beings, and they are, even as kids, and they're going to be who they are, and the best you can do is offer them some guidance, but you can't make them a certain kind of person. So there's a couple of extremes there. On the one extreme, you don't have anything to do with who your kids turn out to be. They are their own persons. And the other extreme is you have everything to do with how your kids turn out to be. It seems like both extremes can make you crazy. And the one answer I won't accept is the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Screw that.
It's not. Well, I mean, that's not the answer, but the truth does.
Okay, where's the mute button? Muting Teddy. All right. Now, who else wants to be muted? Before. All right, I'll unmute you here, Teddy. I'll let you go first, because there is I still have you muted. Let me see the button right. I don't think I can unmute you. I can't. I really shouldn't have done that. Okay, there you go. All right. So you were able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I was.
I exercise the godlike power of muting you, and I want to think that would stick. Let me try this again.
Apparently not.
You're godlike.
All right, now can you unmute? Powers. Can you unmute yourself now? You're muted. All right, you see, that's sticking now. She doesn't even know she's muted, does she? Yeah. Okay, no. You are here. Okay, never mind. I guess I don't have that power. So
I undermined you.
Yes, I'm undermined by my everything in my life.
That was a demonstration of free will overriding God's plan.
It really is. So Teddy, how much power do you think you have? How much influence do you think you have into what kind of person your child will grow up to be?
So we've got the whole nature versus nurture debate. And I believe that we all have a certain personality that we are born with. And that's kind of ingrained in us. And nature can kind of affect that, but there's still just that inherent personality. And so, for example, with me, I mean, to my core, I'm a people pleaser, and people can throw all sorts of stuff, but I will still try to, do stuff to make people happy or whatever. It's part of me. Whereas some people are just really oppositional. I mean, yes, I can be a debater, oppositional.
You're an attorney, right?
Yeah, in that sort of way, but I'm not like on a personal level. I'm not a confrontational person, like somebody that starts fights, like just in interpersonal communications. Like people can say, mildly rude things to me, and I usually let it slide. It's only if people are just intensely aggressive with me that I'll,
I would actually confirm that about you.
Yeah, I mean, I let a lot of low-level offenses go by. If something's in my face, then I'll address it, but otherwise I'll let it slide. But that's an inherent part of me. And so even when life's challenges hit me, that's still just part of who I am. And so other people, some people are naturally just ornery or whatever. I mean, just different personality traits. Some people have more charming personality traits. Some people have less charming personality traits. Some people are, are just less agreeable or don't get along as well with others and whatever. So there's only so much a parent can do to change that nature. I mean, we can try. And a lot of time, one of the interesting things, granted, I'm naturally inclined to please people, but a wonderful technique that my parents used, which I think helped them never have a rebel on their hands, even in my teenage years. I mean, I was just so easy. I'm like, I always tell my mom, I'm like, wow, you had it so easy. She did. I'm like, and that is that anytime, if there was something that I wanted to do or wanted and they disagreed with it, they didn't just tell me no, and, in some authoritarian way. They would tell me no, but then they would give me a reason, an explanation for why. And it was with the explanation is, we love you. We are wanting to protect you and to do what's good for you. And this is why we don't want you to do this or to have this. And because I understood that it was coming from a place of love and that they're wanting to protect me, even if, maybe I still really want to do it, but a lot of times I then understood why, and that would usually make sense. And so I accepted it. But even if I still didn't agree with it, I at least understood why. And it kind of diffuses the need or the motivation to necessarily rebel against one's parents. And so I was never a rebel. I mean, now I can at times have a rebellious, really a rebellious streak. If I think something is wrong, I will go up against it, but I'm not a rebel just to be a rebel unless I'm just in a debate and I'm just wanting to do devil's advocate.
So how does that help you deal with your child when they respond in ways that you think you wouldn't have? Do you think it's your responsibility to kind of get that rebelliousness out of them or make them more like you? Do you accept it? Do you manage it? What do you do with that?
I try to use the technique that my parents used with me, which was to explain why. And now that my son is older and understands a lot more things, I explain why I'm telling him not to do certain things, why it's to his benefit, that I'm trying to protect him, to watch out for him, and that I'm not, trying to be, mean or anything like that. It's I'm watching out for him, and that's now, registering. And so that helps diffuse some of the opposition that sometimes encountered. But
yeah, but what if it's just his nature to be oppositional? Is that something you can accept?
Well, who wants to accept that? I mean, it's that, if it an oppositional nature is that, but there's nothing pleasant about that.
Yeah, but then that puts you in the role of trying to fix your child as opposed to, and so I mean there.
Okay, but here's
I'm making comments.
Right.
I don't have a kid to worry about.
Here's the thing. On a philosophical level, I disagree with this notion that we should just always accept people for exactly who they are, and that every behavior is okay. Now, sometimes there's certain behaviors that people cannot help, and good people, I think it's a nice thing to show grace to people. But like what you're saying is like, well, if somebody's just oppositional, that's just them, and you just love them for, you know, that. And it's like, well, no, I don't have to accept like, oh, well, you're just that way, so just be that way. And, yeah,
Okay,
well,
so
no.
what do you have to accept? Are there some things
Well,
you
I
have to
mean, you
accept?
can still try to change that. I mean, I think that it's good to have standards in terms of what is a good standard
Hold
to
that thought,
uphold.
Andrew. Jump in. What's the deal with this nature versus nurture thing? If you see your daughter forming in a certain way with a certain personality, um, is it your job to fix it, or is it your job to just kind of manage it, and or is it your job to do anything with it at all? What are your limits? You know, because I see a lot of parents. I think it's a mistake anyway. I see a lot of parents making the mistake of trying to force their children to be a type of person that they are fundamentally not. And they take on a lot of responsibility to do that, and then feel guilty when it doesn't work, and end up pushing their children away, and you know that story. So chime in. What's the deal with this?
Lots and lots there. Emma's not my first kid. I've got stepkids. Had them from the time they were very, very young. I think the question's so broad ranging. So personality issues don't have to be magnified into right or wrong. If you take personality and you say, well, this personality trait creates on the back of it an action that is either harmful to the child or someone else. Well, yeah, so now we've crossed a clear line, right? Matthew, I think, has a philosophy. Matthew, jump in anytime I am sort of off the track here. But Matthew has a relationship with his daughter where she can be, what's the British term, cheeky? Is that
That's the
fair?
right word, yeah.
Okay, so she can respond in kind with Matthew. I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think that's a good relationship. Children need to be able to explore the boundaries of their personality at home. They, regardless of their personality type, there will be good things and bad things about their personality that their social environment will work on. But if you say, well, I'm not just talking about personality, I'm talking about shoplifting, well, now we've got a different conversation. If your child is the one that is always talking about injuring another child at school, like that little girl down in Florida that was just stabbed to death by her classmates, there were warning signs that little boy's parents acknowledge leading up to that event, right? So I think the better question is, when is it a personality thing and when is it a warning sign? I think that's much harder. So those are my thoughts, and we can chase any of that or none of it based on how you guys feel. It looks like David disappeared.
David, are you muted? Okay, well, I'll pick up on that and run in my direction while we wait.
Yeah, I'm here.
So yeah,
go ahead. And by the way, you veteran hosts, you don't recognize when someone has to take a pee break, and so you call it out. Thanks a lot.
I just want to know, was that
I'm never going to get rid of these tire marks on the bus you just ran over me with. Anyway,
did you hoist yourself?
You know what? I'm gonna just turn this back off again.
This is what you call a loving intervention. But yeah, just to pick up what Andrew's saying, and you'll have heard me say it on Still Unbelievable if any of you dare to lower yourselves to listening to that podcast over there. But yes, I allow my daughter to be cheeky and to answer back to me, because I don't think it's appropriate for me to push that kind of behavior out from a 16-year-old, nearly 17-year-old. You know, I think it's important for her to push the boundary of that relationship with me. And to give you an example of the kind of relationship we have, the keyring that I have for my car is got a little Lego Batman hanging off it. Now, I've had this keyring probably for about 4 years now, and my daughter bought it for me as a little gift. And when I saw what it was, I was like, oh, cool, you got me a Batman. Is that because Batman's a really cool superhero? And she says, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's because you're not the Joker. And it's clearly a subtle commentary on the quality of my humor. So that's why I've got a Batman on my keyring. It's because I'm not the Joker. And so it's the subtleties that really plays into both my daughter's sense of humor and my sense of humor. And I like that, and I love that. And that's why that's the keyring that I have on my car keys. That's the keyring that's in my hand all the time, because it reminds me of how much I want that relationship to be like that. And I hope I've still got that keyring in 20 years' time. So that's kind of where it is. Like I say, I want to encourage that kind of behavior. But to go back to David's question, how much impact do we have on the way our children come out to? And yes, it is obvious, this is the whole nature nurture debate, but I think the depressing answer to that question is not as much as we think we have. I can't really control what my daughter's personality type is. A lot of people say to her, she's got the same kind of sense of humor as I do. And I think they're right, I can see it. But she hates that. She thinks that's a horrible thing for people to say, because she thinks her sense of humor is far superior to mine. She's wrong, obviously, but as a teenager, she's perfectly entitled to have a wrong opinion, and I won't always correct her on that, but I'll just let her believe the wrong thing and let other people remind her that her sense of humor is shared with mine, and she can suffer those consequences for as long as she cares to. But that's a less important thing. At home, the things I care more about is when she comes downstairs halfway through the day, as teenagers are want to do, and makes herself breakfast 20 minutes before lunchtime, does she clear up after her? That's far more important to me than the nature of our humorous jibes at each other. And I'd much rather a child that came downstairs, tidied up after themselves, cleared up their mess and kept the house generally clean, and then thought in advance about what other things they could do. For me, that's a far more important quality than bickering over who's got the best sense of humor. So where I try to have an impact is in the things that I'm more concerned about, which is that kind of thing. Just generally being a decent person around the house and not leaving a mess everywhere, and thinking about the other occupants of the house, because I think that kind of attitude translates into other parts of life. It translates into the workplace, it translates into interactions on the street, it translates into how you treat shopkeepers when you're visiting a store, and all those kind of things. I'd much rather that everybody in life that doesn't involve me, who interacts with her, has an interaction with her that they leave feeling that they've had a good or a pleasant interaction. For me, that's a far more important thing to have. So I try hard to do that, but I think that there are other people in her life that also impact that kind of thing, and probably far more than me. And specifically, I'm going to go to her school interactions, her teachers at school and her classmates at school. She spends far more time per day, certainly during term time, with those people than she does with me, because she doesn't see me in the morning, or she might do for 10 minutes while she gets dressed and I shoot out the door to work. And she sees me a bit in the evening, but she's a teenager, she's got her own mind, and quite often she'll take herself to a room and do her own thing for half of the evening. So the amount of time she sees me every day is significantly less than the amount of time she spends with her teachers, the amount of time she spends with her classmates. So I think those people probably have more impact on some of her likes, some of her dislikes, some of her behavior aspects than I do. And for a parent, I think that's actually quite a difficult thing to handle, because you means you're ceding responsibility for the shaping of your child's personality to people who you have absolutely zero control of. And I have to trust the school and trust the teachers at the school that they're imparting things onto my daughter that I'm comfortable with and I'm happy with. And that's quite a difficult thing as a parent, when you talk to your child and you talk about the interactions that they have. And to give you one example, 3 years ago now, she came home from school and she uttered probably the worst words any child of mine could ever utter. And that was, "Science is boring." Now, I adore science, and I've always tried to talk sciencey stuff with her and explain sciencey stuff with her. And that devastated me. And so I was determined to get to the bottom of it. It basically turned out, to cut a long story short, she wasn't getting a very good science education at school, partly due to the teacher's control of the classroom. Because, to use my daughter's words, all the boys were constantly mucking around and there was low-level interruptions constantly. So my wife and I made the really hard conversation to change the school that she went to, because that is what I've got control over. I didn't like what she was coming back from school with, so I changed the school, and that changed her, and that changed the education that she got, and it changed her character, and it changed her personality. Now, the only control I had over that was which school she went to. The actual mechanics of the change in her character, the change in her likes, the change in her personality, the way she blossomed as an individual, to become more confident in herself, to go to really enjoying being educated about science, that was all down to the teachers and to classmates at the new school she went to. My decision maybe was a really crucial decision. It was a relatively small decision. The practical implications of having an actual valid impact on her was not me at all. It was her teachers. And I'm glad I made that decision. I'm glad my wife and I agreed to make that decision. I'm glad that we talked to my daughter over that decision, that we agreed the school to go to, went through all the processes to do that. And and my daughter will affirm that she had a really great time at that school. But the point I'm driving to is, as a parent, I think I have far less control over how my daughter ends up than I realize. And that little anecdote shows that the people that your children interact with when they're not under your control has a huge impact on how they turn out. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to accept that, whether we like it or not. And if there is something we can do to direct that, we probably need to think about that too.
So let's transition a bit to parental control. I see you, Teddy. Let me just transition. You can say what you're going to say. It'll fit, I promise. And if it doesn't, you can say it anyway. But I want to push the conversation into slightly more dangerous territory as we continue. And I'm going to open it up to a bit more of a free-for-all. So now we're putting down the practice swords, and
the real skeptics and seekers starts now.
Yeah. So we have to get to some of these challenging things. So you mentioned parental control, Matt. This is a place, whether you are Christian or non-Christian, that drives parents crazy. Now, you said something there a moment ago, and it put me back to a time in my own childhood when we were dealing with a school that just wasn't good for anyone. You said you had the ability to move your child to another school, and that's good. That gives you some control. So if one school is underperforming, you can take her to another school. That hasn't always been the case in America, and it is not the case everywhere in America. And so when I was in school, there were two schools in Sylacauga, Alabama, where I was growing up at the time. One was Sylacauga High, where the great Jim Nabors went. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And the other one was B.B. Comer. Which sounds like a Klan's nest. And it, it was pretty much what it sounded like, because you don't actually want to send your kids to a place called BB Comer for any number of reasons. So, but it was determined where you went to school based on where you lived. And you couldn't just decide, well, I don't want to go to this underperforming school with a bad football team. I want to go to this other school. And by the way, football was one of the determining factors for if you could get an exception, you know, because if your child was exceptionally good football player, there were always ways around the restrictions for where you went to school. And whereas I was stuck with BB Comer, the brother that was a little older than me was having even a worse time of it, and my parents found a way to get him an exemption so that he could go to Sylacauga High. And he had to technically kind of sort of move in with somebody in another side of town to be able to do it. So my parents allowed that to happen. But that's a matter of control, parental control, that a lot of parents would like to exercise. And so I understand, I don't agree with, but I understand the heart of the parents that tend to be more conservative, extremely conservative, fundamentalist, batshit crazy wacko compound. I understand these people who pull their kids out of school and decide to homeschool because they feel like the school system has gone in such a direction and they're forced to send their child to this place that's teaching them things that they don't agree with, and they want to gain some measure of control, and so they go to this extreme and do this. I understand that. Like I said, I don't agree with it, but I am sympathetic toward it. And so I would like to hear from the panelists about things that are happening in society and culture and education that make you feel like you don't have as much control in raising your kids as you want. Now, I can tell you, even though I'm not a foster parent anymore, were I a foster parent, I would be very concerned about schools that had religious content, prayers, things like that, which happens in America all the time. I would be concerned about schools with religious clubs and things like that. I would be concerned about schools with sketchy science books that have very outdated and incorrect material, which is true in this country in lots of places. And I would be tempted to be one of those people that said, look, if I can't take my kid out of this school and put them in this other school, I'm going to take them out of school altogether. I would be tempted to do that. I don't think I would, but that would be one area in the education system in particular where I would feel like I don't have the kind of parental control that I want. Andrew, is there any part of society, culture in general? I'm sorry, I promised Teddy the first bite of this because she wanted to bring that in. Teddy, is there some part of society, culture, education where you as a parent feel like your control as a parent is being infringed?
Well, I think that right now schools have been engaging in a tremendous amount of indoctrination as opposed to just keeping things more. I mean, there's always been a degree of that, even, you know, back in my day when I was in school, but it's far more overt now. And it's not just the subtle political indoctrination, but there is a very strong cultural indoctrination.
Can you clarify what is being indoctrinated, because I
Sure.
want to nod along and say amen, sister, but I don't
Yeah.
think we're talking about the same things.
I think that right now, I mean, what I'm seeing, I find it very disturbing. I grew up, and up until just recently, and I'm probably going to be getting a lot of pushback from y'all, but you know, I'm telling the truth. From everything I have seen, and from what I live life here in America, and I have never seen this much uh, hate crime going on, in terms of with um, with racism in my lifetime. It is just brought to a head, and what we have is there is the fomenting of pitting races against each other, and this whole notion that uh, people, because they're white, we're racist and we can't help but be racist.
Yeah, when you say racism, you mean racism against white people, right?
No, I'm just
Or
saying
just the
that
fomenting of racism in
there is
general.
there is this fomenting of this idea that whites just can't help but be racist, and this fomenting of the notion that America as a whole, there's so much racism going on, when
A lot of focus on racist past.
is there some
Yeah.
racism? Of course, there's always going to be racism everywhere. There's always going to be sexism. There's always going to be some homophobia. There's always going to be some of everything that's evil at all times in history. You can't, I mean, there's always going to be some evil. But prior to, the past couple of years, I think we were at a place where things were probably at the best that they had been in history in this country. And then all of a sudden it just went down. And right now, you have these cultural Marxists that are just trying to pit the races against each other, and to make it seem like white people just hate everybody else, and they're pitting everybody. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm sorry, I'm not racist, and I'm not going to act like I've got something to apologize for when I don't, because I'm not apologizing for something that I have nothing to apologize for.
Sure. So how does this affect your parenting, or if not you, parents of people that you
And
know?
I don't know that that's going on in my son's school. I mean, with the whole COVID lockdown, I don't know that I've been hearing so much of that during the class, but I mean, I've been hearing just that a lot of parents have been hearing their kids talking about that sort of stuff being brought up in schools.
So what's the remedy from your
So
perspective?
I mean, the remedy is that teachers need to keep that kind of politics out of the schools. If they want to talk that kind of smack, they need to keep that in the political arena and not try to brainwash kids. They can brainwash their own kids, but or do what they want in the political arena, but that needs to not be going on in school. In school, the philosophy that needs to be bred is the philosophy that was taught to me both by my family and the society that I grew up under, which was the philosophy that Martin Luther King taught, which is that we do not see color. You do not see color, not the philosophy now that everything is about color, everything is about gender, everything is about all of the differences. No, what we focus on is who the person is, their mind, their heart. That's what matters. That's who a person is. It's not the shell. And these people, and what they're trying to do and brainwash our kids, it's all to just bring about the downfall of this fantastic society that we have. That's had the greatest freedom of any
just kind of keeping it, steering it, somewhere a topic adjacent. So as a parent, what is your response to that? Do you want to pull your kid out of school? Do you
No, I don't want to pull
do you
my kid out of
attend do you
school,
attend
but
school board meetings and have
I
rowdy
haven't,
conversations?
but, I'm probably going to need to, given what's been going on. And there are parents that are starting to raise hell at these school board meetings.
Do you feel like this kind of indoctrination is affecting your child at all?
Well, it's not right now because
Okay.
my child's getting plenty of indoctrination at home.
Okay, so that maybe that's the cure then. Maybe the cure is, and I'm not making a judgment on your opinions. Because I asked what is it that makes you feel like you have less control as a parent, and I'm fine with your answer, but I'm also curious about, so if that's something that makes you feel like you have less control, what's the remedy? What is your response to that as a parent?
I'm not crazy about homeschooling. I like the idea of kids being with other kids and learning the value of competition and just being with others, as opposed to just sort of being isolated in a homeschool and being treated just, I don't know, like a bird in a cage. With my son, one of the wonderful things about my son, and he's like his mama with this, and that is, when he feels very certain about something being right, he sticks to it. And so when there are things, he will butt heads, especially with his mama, on things just to butt heads with her. And this was kind of what I was getting at when we were talking about the nature versus nurture stuff. So he will butt heads with me just for the fun of doing that. But the things that I have been instilling in his mind, I will hear sometimes his teachers telling me things that he says to other kids. And it's things that I have told him. And so I can tell that what I've been putting in his ear, it's going in there. He doesn't, when he's around me, I don't see it. But I find out, in a roundabout way that it's sinking in. And so the nurture aspect, that is important too. And so sometimes that personality, it may kind of camouflage things. It may make people a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit more combative at times, especially with certain people. And I think moms like to be the people that children like to, usually the taskmasters that get the brunt of it. And, usually it's the mothers that are the taskmasters. And I'm certainly the one that's the taskmaster. But in terms of shaping that personality, I think we do have a duty to try as best we can. We can't just say, oh, well, a person's this way, so yeah, let's just let them be this way. No, we have a duty to try to set standards in terms of what we think are the ideal personality traits and try to steer people in that direction.
Let's see then. It sounds like you are not having the kind of control angst that a lot of people are. Andrew, You are an atheist in a largely Christian society. I think it's fair to call this largely Christian society. It's fair to call Britain a largely atheist society. Um, are there some issues for you where you feel because of the culture that you are in, that you have a loss of parental control, and what's your remedy for it?
Yes. So I taught for a little while, about 3 years. And so first, let me say that indoctrination is teaching someone to accept a position without critical thinking, without careful evaluation. So if your child is going to a school where they're not teaching critical thinking, find someplace else for them to be. School is a place where we should be finding alternate ideas. We should be experimenting with other ways of thinking. We should be learning how to think deeply and carefully about the problems of our time. I'll just ask the listeners to think about what indoctrination actually is and what indoctrination is not. Having said that, as far as I can tell, one of the biggest problems that we face in school today is not primarily indoctrination. It is safety in the classroom. You cannot expect children to learn well when they're worried that their classmate has a gun at school. You can't expect them to think well when they're being bullied online. And they're subject to that same bullying right in the classroom, because our kids are taking phones in classrooms, they're being bullied in the classroom. We need to do a better job as a society of creating a better education environment. I don't think any of us have any doubt about that. What are the solutions to making that better environment? I don't have all the answers. And it damn well appears that nobody does. You want better students, make better schools, make safer schools, make schools where children have the ability to achieve. Fucking fund our schools better than they're funded. Apologies. Got a bit of a rant about what we're doing in education. Create better education opportunities. Don't create a world where there's, so David, I know both high schools. Don't create a county where there's a B.B. Comer and a Sylacauga High. Our children are failing, and they're failing on our watch because we're failing to do the right things for them. There shouldn't be a school where they don't have access to, as you mentioned a little bit ago, modern science materials. Our children don't need to learn physics from the 1800s. They need to learn physics from at least the 1900s. So we've got a problem that predecesses what we're teaching in classrooms, and that is to simply have safe classrooms. So that's part of the problem. Part of the problem, as far as I can see.
Matt, it sounds like you have a pretty good handle on parental control with regard to education. Are there any areas in your society or culture where you feel like your child is getting some kind of indoctrination, or some kind of something is happening with regard to your child that you don't have control of, that you feel like your control is being infringed on in some way?
Yes, and I'm fairly sure you'll probably be able to predict what that is. It's less of an issue now, but it certainly was an issue, and it caused a few challenging home conversations at the time, which we needed to work our way through. But basically, it's a subject of church. Listeners to Still Unbelief will know that my wife is a Christian and has taken my daughter to church, as is her right, and I accepted that. But there were a few occasions where she would come home from church, and in the children's part of the church, where you've got people who are not trained teachers, not trained theologians, imparting biblical education onto your children in the way that they themselves decide how it's going to go. And quite often that results in a conflict, certainly with somebody like myself, who likes to see scientific explanations for things and likes to see scientific justification for things. So when your child comes home with something that they've learned at church that contradicts that, it creates a problem, and we've had to navigate through that. And that's one of the challenges of being parents, when the two parents have parts of their worldview which conflict with each other.
It's the ultimate mixed marriage.
That? It is, yes. And to be fair to my wife, she didn't choose that. I created that issue in our marriage by deconverting 15 years into our marriage, and that's on me. I accept that, but we have to solve the issues together. And that creates challenges, because when the daughter comes home and says something that she's learned in the children's part of church, and I react extremely negatively to that because it's factually incorrect, but not only is it factually incorrect, the baggage that it's attached to, I object to quite strongly. And I'm threatening to go marching down to the pastor's house and tell him that under no circumstances is my daughter to hear that ever again.
Yeah, let me just cut in and ask you this, because, and I hope Andrew comes in on this too. As I said, it's ultimate mixed marriage. Forget mixed races. Well, depending on where you live, but this idea of one person being a Christian, one person not, that can work if you don't have kids. And even then, it's real hard. But when you have kids, to me, again, I keep reminding, as a person who does not have kids, that seems impossible. It seems like an impossible scenario. And so at some point, your wife, forget the preacher, your wife is going to say something or do something that's religiously, that's communicating to your kids. And it's something that you don't like, or you're going to say something or communicate something to your kid that your wife doesn't believe in. And you both have to have some kind of agreement, I would think, some signal, some radar, something that says, okay, I'm not going to take this issue up. I'm just going to let her say it and get away with it. Who gets away with it? Does the person who says the Christian thing always get away with it and you just bite your tongue, or does the person who says the atheist thing always get away with it? Does one person end up not saying what they think more than the other? How do you manage that? Because the one thing I know you can't possibly do is you can't tell your daughter, well, your mother's just crazy. So you've got to have some way around that. And so I'm just wondering how that could possibly work, because I don't have enough imagination to figure it out.
David, the trump card is she who carries the baby for 9 months wins. That's always the tiebreaker.
Where's my mute button? Matthew.
That is always the tiebreaker.
I
will remember that.
Yeah, let's throw rationality out the window and just say that somebody that can carry the baby wins. Yeah,
I'd be talking to a lawyer. I'll be honest with you. That just I am not constitutionally set up to do it.
Births the baby wins.
Yeah, never mind if she was on crack.
But Matthew, I want to hear how you go with that, and I know that Andrew has some energy around this that he hasn't talked about yet, so I'm going to just drag that out. So as we're rounding toward the finish line, things are going to get a little bit messy. But tell me how you deal with that mess at your house, because that's a nightmare to me.
I'm not going to go into all the details, because while we've done it and we've managed to stay married together 12 years after I broke the devastating news, it's not been a smooth sail. And the stats for couples in the position that we're on are not good for those who make it, but we've made it. Great, hooray for us. I think there's a couple of reasons in which we make it, and one predominantly is we're here in the UK where religion is less combative. My wife is probably what many American Christians would call a progressive Christian, which probably means that she's not a real Christian at all. So that probably helps as well. I think if my wife had been the young earth literalist Christian that I was for most of my adult life, the story may well have been very different. So I'm blessed with the kind of woman that I married in the first place. Yay me, made a good choice. So certainly there is that. But yes, there are times when you need to make a decision. You either say, yeah, I'm going to jump in this feet first because there's a principle I must uphold, or you say, actually, you know what? Battles need to be picked, and this is not a battle that's worth fighting. And I think what we've done is we've done a lot more of this is not a battle that's worth fighting. We both love our daughter. Our daughter would have been mistreated if we'd gone out the last 10 years fighting over everything and then gone our separate ways. It would have been a worse environment for our daughter if that's what we'd done. And so sometimes you just gotta suck it up, swallow it, and maybe have that conversation at another time in privacy when you can do it calmly, or you just don't have that conversation at all.
Do you feel like the compromise is evenly split, roughly, or is one or the other of you? You don't have to say which, making the compromise more?
I'm not going to answer that one because A, I don't know, and B, it's probably unfair to call either out as that, because it gives the impression of one parent being the better parent, and I don't really want to go down that road. What I will say is, when you start a marriage and have a child, when you're both Christians with a tradition of taking the child to church, and then one of those goes, you know what, this isn't for me, you have to deal with the fact that your spouse is going to continue going to church with the child or the children. You have to deal with that, and you have to suck that up, and you become the bad person if you say, I'm going to ban you from taking the children to church. So you need to find a way to deal with that, and you need to find a way to deal with that amicably, because if you don't, the relationship is over. It really is quite that simple. And I don't think that makes one better by taking the bigger compromise. I think there's a more practicality. And I think trying to put marks on the chalkboard of who's compromised the most just creates an unevenness and a situation where you're fostering resentment in the relationship. And I would say flat out, don't go down that road at all. There lies pain, there lies danger, and nobody will come out well if you go down that road. But it's difficult. And one of the conversations, points that we had was around the situation of, okay, we're in this situation. Maybe one option is, if it's Jesus talk, that goes to mummy. If it's science talk, that goes to daddy. That doesn't work either, you know, because
it sounded like such a good idea when you
no, that frankly doesn't work. Why should I be barred from having an opinion on things that go on in church? I know how church is run. I've been there. Just because I've rejected the structure and the infrastructure, that does not bar me from having an opinion on being able to express something about it. So that doesn't work, because we all have opinions about things that are not our speciality, and we should be allowed to invoke them and talk about them. If we're wrong, then we find out the ugly way that we're wrong, but we should not be barred from expressing our opinion just because it's not our position of expertise.
Does it matter if it's the formative years versus the non-formative years?
Hard question, because I wouldn't say that it's formative years to me. I was a Christian well into adulthood. So I would say that that justification doesn't apply to me. I
No, no,
understand.
I mean, with your children, like for example, if
Okay, sorry, yeah. I think it
in terms
matters
of
even
if they're
more. Yeah,
18 versus if they're 3.
yeah, okay. I think it does matter a lot in the formative years, because this is where very strong, what's the word I'm looking for? This is where precedences can be set in a child's mind. And let me give a very, I don't think this has happened to my daughter, but let me give a very specific example. Imagine that my daughter was going to a very charismatic church and she was being taught that people who used to be Christians and then recant on their faith were never truly saved in the first place, and those people are destined to eternal torment in hell. And imagine at 5, 6 years old, she's being taught that. Imagine what effect that will have on her, knowing that I used to be a believer. And she comes home and she finds me as a loving parent and as a loving father who cares for her well-being and wants to talk things about life through her. But she's being taught this at school, at church, outside that. Can you imagine the kind of damage that would do to a child at that young age, and the risk that has of the relationship with a parent that she loves then, but might become afraid of because of what she's being taught at church? Now, I'm saying that didn't happen to my daughter, but I can envisage a scenario where that could happen.
I don't think that would make her afraid. That would make her anxious for you.
Yes, but it also might make her afraid of me as well. If on top of that, she's also, if she's being learned that people, because this is one trope that Christians push out an awful lot, is that atheists like myself have no basis on which to base their morals. They can't be trusted on things what they say to be right or wrong, and all that kind of thing. So if she's also coming home with that kind of thing, it creates a conflict and a confusion, and it creates a potential issue in a relationship there. And if that was happening, that would be completely out of my control. And imagine then that I find out that this is going on and it's damaging the relationship to my daughter because she's getting concerned about me and getting scared about me and spending less time with me because of all this stuff. So I say, well, okay, something needs to happen. That then creates a problem with the relationship between the two parents, because the father wants to do something to change that, and if the wife doesn't want to leave the church, or it could, the roles could be reversed, so there's a whole load of tension there. I'm really thankful that didn't happen in my situation, but I can imagine that there are people who find themselves in that situation, and I feel for them, and I dread to think what would happen. I'm pretty sure that if my wife and I had been in a situation like that, if we hadn't moved church, that would have caused probably a fatal damage to our relationship. And so that would have been the church having an overall negative impact on the family unit through the things that they teach, which they believe are the right things to teach. So that scenario genuinely bothers me and concerns me. And I think there's a poison in there that needs to be eradicated.
Let me bring Andrew in on this, who I'm surprised has not come in. Hang on, Teddy. Andrew has a legitimate. Andrew has a legitimate bit here. I'll let you and Andrew
Teddy,
argue.
can you actually stop? Can you actually do it in 60 seconds?
No. No.
Okay.
No. So I'm gonna let me just explain.
I remember. Let me just say it real quick.
I've never seen you say anything quick, but I'll give you first bite of the apple because yes, I got something to say here.
Okay, we're going to say the fact that Matthew, with like what you're even saying, I think it just from my reaction to that, I'm so unaccustomed to even being around Christians that think the way the Christians that you were around were thinking, like that because you're an atheist that you would have bad morals. And it goes to show just the very distinct difference between the type of church and Christians that you've been around and those that I have been around. And I've been around not just Greek Orthodox, but lots of different Christians. I've not encountered Christians like that. And so it's like, I don't know. I wish we could just all have a big old kumbaya and just have a session to
You
where we
can't
could just,
have kumbaya moments with servants of Satan.
yes,
Somebody is going to have to yield their underlying belief, and quite frankly, this is exactly the reason why I call this religious versus with atheist marriage the ultimate mixed marriage, especially when they're kids. Because if there is any hint of fundamentalism in that religion, you can't help but go there. It's going to go there. But I'm going to give this to Andrew for a moment, and since it's necessary to say, I'm going to step out for a pee break, so you don't have to note that David seems to have gone. Where's David? All of you expert podcasters here. That's where I'm going.
Go.
So at any rate, I'm going to do that. But I wanted to set this up a little bit because Andrew has been pussyfooting around his own personal issues that he had mentioned that he wanted to talk about on the show, which is the only reason I'm bringing it up. And so I'm saying, Andrew, this is the moment to bring that up, because I think it's important. And this is a slot that I've been trying to groom to fit that in. So go for it.
The sad thing is that you don't actually have to be in a divided marriage to end up in a relationship in which Christianity plays a role. My girlfriend and I, neither of us are Christians. No interest in being Christian. My values and the ones that I will pass on to my child are values that don't cause other people to be harmed. I'm a humanist by and large. She will learn those values. But we live in a Christian extended family. The first time we had a family get together after my daughter was born, we were at our relative's house, and our extended family has prayer before meals. By the way, I have no problem with them having prayer before meals. I don't pray, and I have often politely stepped out of the room. But my extended family wants my daughter raised in a Christian church. I'll just tell you, ain't gonna happen. But here's what did happen. My girlfriend's mother, my daughter's grandmother, maternal grandmother, saw family prayer coming. And she asked to hold the baby because they were whispering about this prayer. I wasn't in the loop. But when she asked to hold the baby, I said, okay, sure, fine. But I want her back before prayer because I'm taking her outside. Why? Because I have no intention of letting her be indoctrinated into prayer starting at so like I said, she's roughly newborn at that point. But if I let it happen now, they will continue this prayer thing with her and she'll be indoctrinated into it. So sure enough, her grandmother picks her up, tell her I want her back before the prayer. What does she do? She walks off into the prayer circle. And then I had to play the bad guy. So, yes, I walked in, I interrupted, I took the baby, and I walked outside. Now, you could easily say, but look, she's a baby, she's never going to remember it. That's absolutely right. She'll never remember it. On the other hand, no one has the right to take my child into any sort of religious setting without my approval. And right now we face this every time our family gets together. So what has it done? This insistence on conservative evangelical values has broken our family relationship. My girlfriend, her relationship with her parents is much degraded because we won't let them take our daughter to Sunday school. Because we won't let them bring her into family prayer. Because there are some stories that we won't let them tell her. Our family is broken. Yesterday, they're doing some remodeling work. My girlfriend's parents doing some remodeling work at their house. Went out to help them get the work done. We don't want this relationship broken. We will do everything we can to repair it. But if you're the kind of nut that thinks that your views override my views and override my desires for my daughter, you need to bow out. And I will do what is necessary to keep that kind of person out of her life, because here's what's not going to happen. I'm not going to have to tell her that her grandparents are so crazy that they hear voices in their heads. I'm not going to put my daughter in that position. But that is what they say. These people believe that God talks to them inside their heads. I'm also not going to be put in the position of having to defend myself to my daughter. When one of these people says, your dad's a baby killer. By the way, that's been said in our family group messages. The harm of religion is not that religion exists. Religion can exist perfectly fine. The harm of religion for my family is when people think that my daughter should be a target for their crazy views. I damn well won't have it.
Andrew, you mind if I engage you on this?
At your own risk.
Oh, I risk. So I totally get, the general principle of, sorry for the puppies' squeals in the background. I totally get the principle of a parent having sort of a very strong dominion and control over their child.
Not what this is about.
Not, well, it kind of is.
No, it kind of is not.
Well,
You're dead wrong.
I bet you're your child and you have your principles and you don't want them influenced.
This is not about dominion.
Well,
you're simply wrong, Teddy.
How
there are principles here.
But if you don't want their principles, you want your principles.
No, that's not right at all.
Okay, so can you correct me?
I've been trying to.
Okay.
They've got perfectly good principles in some ways. And I want my granddaughter, I want my daughter to get to know her grandparents. If you had listened very carefully, what you'd have heard is they can't push their religious views. Well, I'm not finished. Because their religious views are actually the thing causing the conflict.
I'm speaking about the religion. That's the principles. Okay. That was, I probably should have said specifically religion, but that was what I was referring to, not just their principles in general. So as a parent, I get the whole thing that in general, parents want to control, and I'm speaking generally initially.
You're using a word that I wouldn't use though.
Okay, but let me
Well-
take it from the general to then narrowing it down. Is
Well,
it general?
let me just replace the word control with indoctrination, because the difference that we already have, and I'm correcting you here so that we don't end up on a long dialogue, that is not part of my position.
But we're going to get to.
Well, look,
Set it up.
the listeners have to know that control is not what I'm talking about.
But it is.
No, it's not.
If you just let me get out what I'm going to say, you're going to see what I'm saying. I'm trying to initially set up the general principle that parents, when you have a kid, it's your kid. And so parents have a right to, control what goes on with their kid. That's a general principle that most people agree with. Now, there are extremes, like you're not allowed to abuse your kid. The state has an interest in protecting kids. So a parent doesn't have ultimate dominion and control over their kids. So that's what I mean, dominion and control over, this is my kid. But you can't have complete control because there's abuse, and parents can't have sexually abuse their kids. They can't physically abuse their kids.
None of which is what we're talking about.
And I know that, but I'm just saying there's the general principle that parents have a very high amount of dominion and control of their kids. Now,
That's not what we're talking about.
I know
So
that.
I'm
I know
trying
that.
to get you to
Now
move
we're
on
getting to the point of religion. Now, I agree with you that you as the parent, so long as that child is under your household and that child's a minor and that child's staying with you, you get to control what they hear.
You keep using, this is why I keep pushing back on you, Teddy. And it's why I kept cutting you off.
Mhm.
It's not about control. I don't have a problem with my daughter eventually learning whatever her grandparents have in mind. What I will not permit, let me finish. What I will not permit is early indoctrination.
Right. Okay. So you're controlling that. You're exercising dominion.
What I am doing is preventing indoctrination. What is indoctrination, Teddy?
Well, it's
Teddy, what is indoctrination?
Indoctrination is instilling a certain information into a person so that they believe it. That's what indoctrination is.
Well, indoctrination is teaching someone something without critical review.
Okay, but
and so
that's
it is
what all parents
possible.
do initially. I mean,
what do you mean?
Okay, look, you don't. A good parent doesn't say to their kid, "Hey, kid, I'm not going to teach you that there's this thing called good, and you really, good and evil are on the same plane. And hey, which do you like best?" No, you indoctrinate your kid that good is what you want to do, not evil. So, I mean, let's not pretend.
Wait. Don't go creating a vocabulary for me.
Okay, why not?
Why will I not let you, and why should you not create a vocabulary for me? Because if we're going to have a reasonable conversation, I'm not finished. If we're going to have a reasonable conversation where both people are equally heard, then you can't put words in my mouth.
I'm talking good and evil, Andrew.
I'm not. Those aren't words that I generally use.
Okay.
That's why I said don't create a vocabulary for me.
Okay, well, for most of your life you used them. You went to seminary, okay? So good, bad, whatever, ethics, lack of ethics.
Well, wait a minute. Good and evil are words that when used in that kind of phraseology, good and evil, largely import a religious context. That's why I objected to it.
Is there anything?
And in fact, you tied it to seminary. You said you used these words in the past because you went to seminary. That is exactly the language.
Do you not think that there's anything that's evil? Is an
Uh,
atheist?
No, I don't think that there's anything that is promoted by a devil.
No, I'm not saying promoted by a devil. Forget the devil. Is there anything that you will call
Well, then
out?
forget the word evil.
No, let's just
And
call,
we can
let's
have a
just call it.
different, no, I'm not going to call it what you want.
What do you want to call it?
Well, there are things that are harmful. There are things that are destructive. There are things that are antisocial. There are things that are painful. There are all kinds of things, and lumping it all together in
Those are all kind of
and
small.
lumping it all together in some word called evil that has a largely religious set of baggage.
But you know what? Evil packs a big wallop as opposed to harmful. It's just a little antisocial.
But you know what?
Evil got
wallop it gives to me is you're a religious nut.
No, I'm not a religious nut. I'm not the one that.
Wait a minute. It's the wallop that I'm talking about. This
No.
thing that you want the
Okay.
word evil to do does it for you, not for
No.
me. That's been the
For
point here, and
example,
that's why I won't let
Okay.
you create a
Okay, I'm gonna
vocabulary.
step in right
happened?
here because I don't mind vigorous conversation and argumentation, but I think this went awry when Tay was trying to make a point and didn't get her whole point out. And so I want to hear, Teddy, if you can go back to your original
Yeah.
point. Let's get that out, and then we can talk
Because
about
it is
why
an
it's
important point
you know
about
what.
the whole grandparents thing. And now, so let's get to the grandparents thing, because it's an interesting issue, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's an interesting thing to kind of tangle with. And it
As you
goes
started
to
here,
be,
we'd be in good shape.
and it go the what?
As you started here, we'd be in good shape.
Well, I know, but you wouldn't let me get it out. Because anyway, so
Okay, yeah, let's focus on Teddy getting her argument out.
okay,
That's-
so for the grandparents, for any Christian who truly believes in heaven and if you're a Christian, if you're a genuine Christian, then you believe in heaven and hell. I
Okay.
guess there's some of them that think, oh, it's just not real or whatever. But if you truly believe in hell, and any Christian that has any sense, okay, maybe it's all figurative language, but who is going to take the chance that it is not, given how extreme the language is, and given that it is a lake of fire, and that it is forever, okay, and all that. So if you realize that that is a real possibility, if you see your grandbaby that you love and you have a choice of either, and you believe this with all of your heart, and it is no, wait, okay, you're always big on, oh wait, I'm talking. Okay, I'm going to do that now. All right.
Well, we see the point.
I'm talking. If it's between,
Get done so that I can finish this up.
Okay, well, see, she's on the other foot now.
You are replying to me, so if you
okay, but just hold on, I can't get my point out.
Andrew, we need to let Teddy get her point out, because she really hasn't had a chance to finish a full thought.
So
I disagree.
Yeah, well, you keep doing what you keep accusing me of.
Grandparents.
So my point is that if people really believe that, then the choice before them is, am I going to respect my son or my son-in-law's wishes to do what they want with their with their child? Is that more important than saving my grandbaby from hell? Well, that's really kind of a no-brainer, if you ask me. When you put those two choices for somebody, if they really believe what they believe, that's a no-brainer. Now, how many people really believe what they believe? And many Christians don't put their money where their mouth is, or a lot of times they don't even really truly think of things in these terms. And one of the things that And I must commend Matthew, your family that you grew up in doing missionary work. I remember in college, I went to, with my roommate, to a church service where it was the non-denominational church service, and the preacher made a comment about missionary work. And he said, when people really believe in what we're saying and what is going to happen from what we see to non-believers, it creates a zeal to save your fellow man if you care for them, if you take to heart what the message is in the New Testament to love your neighbor as yourself. Then it creates in you this wanting to protect others, to spread that word. And especially if it is your family, if it is your friends, you will want to do that. And it is, Andrew, going to trump their respect. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't respect you, and you as a parent, and your girlfriend is the child's parent, but there is something even more important at stake. Their grandbaby burning in hell is more important than respecting you and having your child not being exposed to God, protecting their baby from the fires of hell. If that is in fact what hell is, they're not going to take that chance. And so you need to think in terms of things from their perspective, and that is real to them. As if you really ever truly internalize that you say you were a Christian, if you ever really deeply were a Christian, then you should understand what that felt like in terms of understanding hell and heaven. And if you really cannot internalize that, and if you really cannot put yourself in their shoes to understand the angst that they must feel for their grandbaby that they love.
I'm going to pop in right there.
Okay,
I'm going to pop
had
in
enough of
just
the
as a
sermon.
buffer between Teddy and Andrew right now. Andrew, you'll have the next piece of this, but this is just a show note. This is where the show was always going to end up, no matter how we wound around getting here. So that said, I'm prepared for this next piece, and I just want to say that Teddy, I understand where you're coming from. I think everybody on the panel understands where you're coming from because we have been there. I actually think it's one of the worst things about Christian evangelism. I recommend the Poisonwood Bible as just a fantastic
Robert
book
Kingsolver.
to illustrate this. It's a work of fiction, but it's freaking fantastic, no matter which side of the religious debate you're on. So I just wanted to give Andrew a little bit of a buffer before I let him go on this. And I also wanted to get a chance to come in and say, Teddy, this expression that you are making, while heartfelt and true, is exactly why the debate is so fervent in the US. This is exactly why it is, and why someone like Matt might be there thinking, "Oh, these people are crazy. Nobody, no, this would never happen here. No one would." But Matt, I promise, this is the air that we breathe, whether you are in a religious house or not. And it is the air that says the religious person has a greater right somehow because they feel very deeply about this thing and their conscience would be harmed. It's the debate. It's the same debate that says that a clerk, a county clerk, has to issue a marriage license to gay people, and the clerk saying, no, I won't do it, and going to court and winning because it would hurt her conscience. It's the same debate that back in Jim Crow days, when a person said, I will not let black people in my restaurant to eat with white people equally because I think that's an unconscionable mixing. It is the same debate that has gone back a long ways in this country that says the religious conscience is the most important thing and trumps everything. And that's where we live right now. And that is the argument that Teddy is making. And I don't know that she has thought about it in that way, but that is the thing.
The question is, what is true?
No, it's not actually the most important question.
It is.
No, it's not.
What I'm saying is
It's
true.
the religious. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Andrew. But I just wanted to point this out. This is in fact the debate, listener, that you are hearing. So when you see people on the board saying, "Oh no, you're just talking about a fringe of religion," no, we're not. This is the matrix that we live in this country. This is not the fringe. The fringe is when you can live your life without this as a part of it. And so Andrew, Teddy has laid down the idea that the religious conscience, the religious view of reality, is in fact the most important thing, and it trumps your rights as a parent. I'm sure that you have something very measured to say.
I said within the family, and to understand where they're coming from. I think
we heard it, and I understand where they're coming from. But
I'm not saying the government should infringe upon Andrew's rights.
Just wait.
Can I just flag up? I've got 10 minutes before.
Okay, Andrew, let me ask you to yield just a moment longer to Matt because he's got a limited time before he has to go. But I promise you'll get a chance to respond fully.
I just wanted to flag up. I've got 10 minutes to let Andrew have his say.
Matthew, if you've got something you want to say.
No. Okay, you say your thing.
All right, here we go then. It won't take long. First of all of that diatribe. Sorry, Teddy, I'm not trying to poke you. But I'm not concerned. All of that diatribe about how deeply they are convinced about the existence of hell is exactly why I kept pushing back on you about the word indoctrination and not control. And that is the exact reason that I would not subject a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old to those kinds of views. I don't care how convinced you are that hell exists. In fact, it doesn't even matter if you're her grandparents.
Get away from the word indoctrination.
Maybe the guy that preaches at the Islam temple down the road feels equally well like 3-year-old girls ought to be told about Allah in their proper place in the world.
That's why truth has to be debated.
Well, that's what we're doing. True. And indoctrination is not a debate. And that is why I would not let you cast my position as control, because when you want, and this is Christian doctrine down to the ground, train up a child when he is old, he won't depart. No way. No way in hell. Not going to happen. You want to teach my child and you think you've got truth, then you can break out the tools that help us evaluate truth, but you can't teach her about hell when she's 2. I don't care how convinced you are. I don't care how convinced.
Are they trying to teach her about hell, or are they just trying to pray?
What do you think Sunday school is?
I know, but they're trying to teach.
If you know, then you know the answer to the question.
When there's a prayer. I mean, come on.
Dave
You
Pegg,
don't want
you
her
Dave
around
Pegg, a
any
former
of it.
guest on this show, believes that his 7 or maybe it was 8-year-old child was subject to going to hell.
You come on.
He has
I
been
know
he has been
these people.
teaching his child. This is a Brit who's in the British school system. He's been teaching his child about this for some time. Teddy, I understand that the Greek Orthodox does not have a focus on this, and so
On
there
hell,
could be some
I don't
there
know
could
what-
yeah,
know
there could be
about
some
hell.
cultural dissonance right here. But Teddy, you have to understand that the people who are so afraid of hell today are the people who are indoctrinated in exactly the way that Andrew is talking about right now.
I grew up going from kindergarten to second grade. I was at a Lutheran school where we were going to chapel once a week and getting Bible study. So I was getting some Lutheran education, and then from 4th and 5th grade at a Baptist.
When did you hear about hell? When's the first time you heard about hell?
I don't know that I can
That's
recall
the
it not
that's the
knowing.
point.
I've
You
always
don't.
known about
Nobody
hell.
knows. You've
I've
always
always known
exactly
about it.
because it's
It's
a
always
part.
been
It's a part of the environment. It's a part of
think
the
it
air
should
that we
be.
breathe here.
I think it should be, because
I don't care.
I believe that it's important. I think that humans, in order to bring about good behavior, it's important to know that punishment is a possibility.
Teddy, do you
I have
believe
no
Wait a
that
minute.
parents? Do you
Wait,
believe
wait,
that?
wait.
Do you
Hell and
believe that?
punishment are not synonymous.
Yeah.
What?
Do you?
Hell and punishment are not synonymous.
Sure they are.
No, they're not.
Do you believe that legally
Yeah.
speaking, that all children should know about hell? That all parents should teach their children about it so that they don't go to hell? I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
how would that happen? Would there be like a
There's the
state
crazy.
priest?
What? Wait.
Yeah. Do
Should
you
all children know about hell?
Yeah. Do you believe
Sure.
that? Do you
I
believe
think
that
all
should?
ch-
Well, should
Sure.
it be enshrined into law?
Huh.
Because what you're saying
How
is
old should they
essentially
be when
that
they hear about hell?
if a child doesn't hear about it, like it's a bad parent, and that you should override that parent's judgment to make sure that that child has the appropriate knowledge. Now, if you think that, then what you have to think is that the state should accommodate that somehow.
I know.
But at what age? 2 years is 2 years old too young?
And
When do you?
Are you
when do
talking
you
about
teach
the
these
government?
children about hell? I don't care where you teach.
I
don't
think
care whether you
I
teach
think
it
it's
in
fine
courtrooms
as
or
soon as a
classrooms.
child is early as a child is able to understand things like concepts like God. I think it's perfect.
So at what
Matthew's
age-
about to
at
burst
what
out of his
age
skin here.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
can
go ahead,
I-
Matt.
will you-
I'd like to take this. It's on the tangent of discipline, and is the one thing that I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to come up tonight. So typical me, I'm bringing it up with 5 minutes to go. But quickly before I get that, I'd want to echo something that you said earlier, David, about the this enthusiasm with which Christians want to put out their message, and the way that butts up against other people and their rights. And I want to absolutely endorse that. That occurred to me as well. You know, that is probably one of the biggest motivating driving factors of Christians and in the work they do, and certainly motivates missionaries. But it is also the biggest poison of the effect of Christianity. And I don't see the missionary heritage that's in my family history as a good thing at all, because of the damage that it did to local heritage and indigenous cultures. I think that's a terrible, terrible price that countries that missionaries went to paid for having this religion foisted on them by well-meaning, superior feeling white people. And I think it's horrible. The missionary school that I went to, every single teacher that I had, every single person who was in control was white, and every person who did subservient work was black. This is the legacy of Christian missionary work, and I utterly, utterly detest it with a passion. But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to point out was discipline and discipline of children, and in the context of doing that in a faith. And in the Christianity that I grew up with, there was this concept of when God was making you, first he had to break you, and people would come into prayer meetings and they'd be worried about something, and they'd be often on the verge of depression about something because they didn't think they were good enough about something, and they would come to these prayer meetings emotional and psychological wrecks, you know, and they'd sob their heart out, and they'd have some form of rudimentary amateurish counseling in this prayer meeting, certainly not what they really needed. And when they would be giving their testimony months later about all this, they describe it in the concept of God had to let me get to my lowest before he could rebuild me. He had to break me down so that he could remold me into what was. And this whole concept of God either making you become the lowest and the most broken person you could be, or letting you become the lowest, most broken person you could be before he could make something nice out of you. And that mentality and acceptance of the way that God treats us carries in to parenthood and the way that parents treat children. And I confess I had this kind of attitude in the early days of my parenthood, and I am really, really thankful that my daughter was too young to be a victim of this kind of behavior by the time that I had deconstructed, because that's an utterly awful and terrible parenting strategy to take. Children should not be treated like clay vases that you break up and smelt and make into something else. Clay is probably the wrong material to use in that example, but you get what I'm saying. Children should not be treated like that. That is an absolutely terrible way and terrible attitude with which to hold children. And the fact that Christians accept this and put this kind of mental anguish as a just God treats them in a loving way is simply despicable. And I don't get any of it. And I look at it and I weep for the emotional strength of people who are going through this, because there are better ways to be treated, and they keep going back to churches for more of this awful, awful psychological torture. And then people do this to children, and words fail me to express the contempt with which I hold that kind of treatment of children. And that is the burning thing that I wanted to bring into this conversation. This is the thing that I see as the biggest difficulty with religion and parenthood, which I really wanted to bring out and to emphasize in this conversation. So there it is.
Thank you.
There is an ethical bankruptcy in saying that we should be able to debate about true things, and to, on the back of that, suggest that you should be able to teach whatever you want to a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4-year-old. Teaching a 4-year-old is not a debate, and it is ethically bankrupt to suggest that debating about the nature of the universe is equivalent to teaching a 4-year-old. It's not. A debate only happens. A debate only happens between 2 people of broadly equal skill and broadly equal knowledge.
That's why I said that parents exercise dominion and control for the most part over their children, and they do indoctrinate their kids because they are in charge of what's going into those skulls full of mush. And they, whatever their beliefs are, they usually, push them into their children. And, many parents can let their kids think what they want, but
Christians can't.
I don't.
No, that's not true. That's not true. But the thing is
you just offended. Sorry, Teddy, but you just offended my daughter's grandparents.
What I'm saying is that if you've got a Christian that is going to say, okay, well, you're making your decision, they're going to probably hope that the person's old enough, but that doesn't mean that they're still not going to try. I mean, ultimately, you can't force people to do things. And there's a certain point to where a person's free will is their free will. And sometimes, honestly, if you want to get really down to the nitty gritty, it depends on how much you care about them.
I have no idea how what you just said relates to what we're talking about. I'm not being ugly.
If I had
So
a
let me-
grandbaby that was, if I were your parents, you know, I'm just saying, I wouldn't be, you know, I mean, I don't know.
You'd be on the outs.
Sorry, Teddy, are you just as open to the idea of, let's say the grandparents are scientists, atheists and scientists, and they teach your child that the earth was not created in 7 days, and we have no evidence at all that it was designed intelligently by any intelligent force. Would you be okay with them holding that truth to be so important that they would teach your child that, despite the fact that you don't want them to teach your child that? Are you okay with that?
About Islam.
I think that the Bible, it doesn't tell you the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts.
That's a yes or no
that's
question.
Fine. That's fine.
Okay, so you're at least consistent that you're okay with people teaching your children things that you specifically don't want taught to your children.
When have I been anti-science? I'm
Okay, but whatever their truth is that you may disagree with.
I'm not anti-science.
Okay, well, what if
I asked you about
The
Islam?
Bible isn't either. The Bible is not a science.
That's fine, but Teddy, I don't think you're engaging with the spirit of the question. So let me make it more pointed. If they taught your child there is no God, there is no hell, and that all of this is a fairy tale, and
who taught? If who taught?
Well, someone close to you in your life, a parent, say, or aunt, or someone who's looking after your children, and they taught your child every time that they had access to your child that there is no God and there's no hell and the devil and angels are all fairy tales. Would you be okay with that?
I would not be crazy about it, but my job.
Would you allow it?
Actually, you know what? Here's the biggest thing.
I'm going to believe whatever you say, but I would like a yes or no. Would you allow it?
As I think about it, my answer is going to be yes, I will allow it. And let me tell you why. And this is a well thought out answer in 2 seconds.
Sure.
But the reason why that's the right answer is because you know what? Kids are going to be encountering this kind of information all the time. Kids, it's not just when they're little. I mean, look at y'all. Y'all were much older, and y'all had been growing up in Christianity.
That's fine. I was just checking to see if you were being
my
consistent.
My point is that what a parent's job is to try to perhaps give the best arguments and instill the best and strongest arguments in their child from an early age. And that is the reason why, and you know what? Teddy has not brought this up in forever.
What do you
would
mean,
you-
give the best argument to a
The
4-year-old?
shroud in science.
What do you mean give the best argument to a 4-year-old?
Okay, but
No,
The
wait, no,
four-year-old's
don't
not gonna
dodge this. What do
understand.
you mean give the best argument to
Okay,
a 4-year-old?
a 4-year-old, you just present different opinions, okay?
And some of those opinions, do you agree that
No.
that people that are important to a 4-year-old, their opinions matter more without respect to whether the proposition is true? That 4-year-olds are subject to authority bias, and that's why we should be careful. Do you think that's a thing?
I will agree with you there, Andrew.
enough.
I will agree. I will agree.
So,
with you.
as we are getting ready to lose Matthew, I would like to have his issue addressed a little bit so that he can kind of hear what he's missing. Discipline it's on the list. I wasn't actually going to bring it up because it's such a difficult issue. I don't believe in punishment, so I've said that a number of times. I think I left it dangling in the write up, and I think I'll leave it dangling here too. And I think that many people associate discipline and punishment as being synonymous. And so that's not a thing that I believe in, which is to say, you've done a bad thing, so I'm going to do a bad thing to you to teach you a lesson, or just to instill some sense of justice. Because even if it doesn't teach you a lesson, you did a bad thing has to happen to you. I don't believe in that at all. Retributive punishment just doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you're doing it to a small child who honestly doesn't understand. It's like beating a dog for pooping in the house. The dog has no idea why the hell you're beating him, and that if you want a dog to not poop in the house, that ain't the way to do it. I promise.
Usually they don't associate it because they don't get the punishment immediately.
Yeah, but no, look, no, sorry.
Not that I'm
immediacy has nothing to do with this in this. So I don't want to get drawn off there, but I'm just trying to explain the kind of retributive punishment that doesn't make any sense, doesn't make any sense in animals, doesn't make any sense in kids either. So that said, what does make sense when it comes to discipline? I will just offer this brief thing in foster parenting class, because you have to go through several modules, several weeks, months actually, before you're qualified, at least in most states. I think it's a state by state thing. But in this discipline module, there were things that we were taught that we could never do, even if you did it with your own kids. You can't do it with a foster kid, or else you would go to jail. So you can't use physical punishment. Can't do it. Sorry. Whether the state has laws about spanking or not is irrelevant. You spank a foster kid and they find out about it, you're jailed. But what you could do and what you needed to do was physically restrain your child from time to time, because, as I mentioned, children in the system are often damaged in many interesting ways, and they can be violent and dangerous, not just to themselves, but to you and to other people around you. You have to learn how to physically restrain without creating a violent or dangerous act. And so there's a maneuver for that. We all had to learn it. That is not the same thing as a beating, a spanking, a whipping, or something like that. And so I am just curious to get a quick round robin, 10 seconds each, starting with Matt, who can have 30. Your thoughts on discipline, go.
We have a 5-month-old rescue puppy at home, and through the charity that we got that puppy, we got a list of things on how to get the best behavior out of your puppy. And they say exactly what you've just said, David. Do not respond angrily or violently to any negative behavior. Full stop, big no. Reward good behavior, ignore bad. They'll soon learn that if they do that, they get nothing, because any kind of response is a response that can be responded to. So do not give them that. They do something bad, they try to climb the counter, just ignore it, or if they're in danger, you move them, but you make the behavior unrewarding. That's the key. And then when they do something good, like both feet on the floor or whatever, yay, hooray, good dog, here's a treat. So they learn all 4 feet on the floor, they might get something. If they're trying to counter serve, they won't get anything. And it works exactly the same with children. Believe it or not. Wow. Who said, mammals, similar behavior. Wow, what a trauma. So, yeah.
You can even use the same dog treat, because it's probably better.
You probably can. Yes. You beat children, all they're going to learn is violence begets violence. If you want to get the way that you want, you use violence. That's what they're going to learn if you use that kind of response. So that's really all I got to say.
Andrew, discipline.
I have never found a reason to hit a child that was a good enough reason to actually do it. The American Academy of Pediatricians, as they do every year or two, release study after study of the harm that comes from hitting children. This year, it was 2020, not 2021, it's my apologies. 2020, same information. There is no hitting a child that is a good hit. It's that simple. And to go along with that, there is no good age at which it is reasonable to teach someone that there's someone out there with a flamethrower that'll use it on them forever if they do something wrong.
Well, right. So I think there's a certain psychological equivalent to hitting, right? So you can inflict a psychological hit on someone just with your words or your demeanor. You can scare them, create shock and anxiety and fear, and sometimes that's worse than the hit. I know that when I was a foster parent, we had those very, very clear instructions, and I can see why some parents might want to smack their child, but I can tell you, I never did. I never wanted to. It wasn't. So of all of the ways that I was broken, that wasn't one of them. When my child was having a tantrum, now I was embarrassed, which is really the wrong reaction, because it's not about me, it's about my child. And here I am thinking about how this is making me look, which saying that just makes me look worse. And now I feel even worse. But, I felt for my child in his mental anguish. I wanted to give him a big hug, but that's actually kind of a no-no too. I was torn apart when my child was screaming and raging and unconsolable. At no point did I ever want to raise a hand in anger and create some kind of punishment for that. Now, you could ask me what we did do on that stuff, and I would just say, I'm not going to tell you because it's not important. But I can tell you all of the things that I didn't do and all of the ways that I didn't feel. And I think that's the one thing I'm proud of in my time as foster parent, because I was raised in a home where violence was acceptable punishment. And I say this about my parents who might one day hear this podcast, sorry. But, I grew up in the South during a certain time where, it wasn't just spankings. Nobody spanked anybody. It was belt whippings and, paddlings and switches and things like that. I grew up in that environment, and there's no part of me that ever wanted to pass that on. I never wanted for a moment my child to be afraid of me because of something they were doing. Teddy, discipline.
Sorry, gotta go.
Well,
Thanks, Matt.
I believe in discipline, and I think discipline and punishment are pretty much interchangeable in my world. In terms of physical punishment, corporal punishment, generally speaking, I think that is something that should be used as a last resort. With very young children that do not understand, where you cannot reason with them, and when they're doing something dangerous. For example, when my son was very, very young, he was still in diapers. We had a chair that he used to love to jump on. Well, in law school, they, drill in your head about trampolines and how everybody, winds up as a paraplegic from neck injuries. And so he would jump on it, and I'd get him off of that, and he'd just go straight back, and it was just constant back and forth. So at first I would just, he wouldn't stop. and I would just kind of swat him on the behind a little bit. He'd just go right back to it. And then I'd, a little bit harder, and then, good. And he'd just still go back. And, oh, somebody's at the door. And
okay.
so he would just keep doing it. And then finally I got like a little cheese board, like a little wooden paddle. And of course, this is on a diapered behind. But the motivation is safety. He's not understanding. But even that, he still kept going, and he would have this little, twinkle in his eye, like, I'm gonna go do it. I'm just gonna be obstinate and oppositional. But then finally it got to the point where I felt like, he's still a little kid. I don't want to go any firmer because I certainly don't want to leave any type of a red mark or anything. And I finally realized, okay, this isn't curbing the behavior. I don't want to do this just to do it. So I stopped. So, I had to figure out some other way. I don't even remember what that was, but I was like, okay, this is pointless. But I do think that when you've got a child that is that small and is not responding, and they're doing something that can be dangerous or harmful to them, I'm okay with physical punishment. Like I said, I think it's something of last resort. I'm not crazy about it. With older kids, I think that usually there are other means of punishment that are just as effective as physical punishment. So, but I think that there's some people that are very motivated towards rewards, and some people that are more motivated towards escaping punishment. For example, with me, I'm not as motivated towards the gaining of rewards. But if you tell me that, hey, if I don't do something, I'm going to have some sort of negative consequence, that'll really get my attention. As
Right.
opposed to,
I think
like,
that's
hey,
true.
you can win this prize. I've never been one of those, like, hey,
I think that's true. Most people, Teddy. I think if the motivation is not, if you run real fast, you'll get $1 million. The motivation is there's a bear behind you. Which one is going to get the person running faster? It's not the $1 million. It's the bear.
People are geared that way.
I get what you're saying. And if I had been a parent when I was 18, 19, 20, I would have probably done the same thing that my parents did. There was enough time between the time that I became a parent and the time that I was a child that I had some perspective by then. So I'm not, I don't want to sound judgmental toward what you're saying, because I understand it. But I would just say that anytime physical punishment is in the equation, kids, whether they're boys or girls, they toughen up real fast. And so punishment is a little bit like a fine for a speeder. They have a fast car. They want to go fast. How much will it cost me to go fast on this road? And it's just a fee at that point. They charge you $500 for speeding ticket. Great. I've got $500. I'm going to open it up to 120, and I'm going to enjoy my afternoon. It's just a fee at that point. I had a dog that I learned this on. I would like to say when I was very young, but I was actually old enough to know better. I had got one of those electric fences, put a shock collar on because he kept jumping over the fence. Unbelievable, the athleticism of this dog. And it got to a point where you could just see the dog. He knows he's got a shock collar on. He knows that when he crosses this barrier, it's going to give him a painful shock, and he would pay the price up front and then jump and run. And he was just that, okay, that's the fee. Got it. Kids will toughen up to any physical punishment so that you have to keep increasing it. And so if you're thinking, well, I'll go this far, no further, there's no such thing. because they can deal with as far as you want to go.
But it depends on the kid. For example, I mean, I was such an easygoing kid. The Greeks, there's an expression, and they call it, they say, oh, that person's like soft bread. They're just so easy. And my mom would always say that about me. But the one thing that I, was a little problematic with is sometimes I'd have a little bit of a smart mouth. And so sometimes I might.
I can't imagine, Teddy. I can't imagine.
So sometimes I might pop off and say, like in the teenage years, and say something a little smart alecky. And
I'm having trouble picturing it.
No. Okay. And so I remember, and actually it may have been in the preteen years, my best friend, she had just learned the word shut up, which of course then I learned from her. And so my mom was getting on my case about doing something. And that was the other thing I'd sometimes get into trouble for. Like she would tell me to do something and I was engaged in doing something and I wouldn't respond immediately. And so I might get into trouble. Those are the two things that I might get in trouble for. But anyway, so she was getting on my case probably because I wasn't responding to her immediately about doing some chore or whatever. And so I responded for whatever reason to something, trying to use my new word. And I told my mother, and this was actually pretty out of character for me to say something like this, but I just heard my friend say it. And I told my mother to shut up. My mother came at me like a puma, getting ready to attack within an inch of me, saying, "You better never say that word again." It just, but and in the past, on a few occasions, now I don't remember getting a slap in the face, or maybe I did, I can't remember. I don't think I did on that occasion, but there have been a few occasions where if I said something smart alecky, where I'd get a nice slap in the face for it, with the admonition from my mother, next time you better think before you speak. Now, it's not nice getting a slap in the face, but you know what?
Nor is it legal in most places, I would think.
I have to admit, well, back then it certainly was.
We came from the same era.
Yeah.
All three of us on here. In fact,
I'm not sure nowadays. It probably depends on where you're at and if it would leave a mark and stuff like that. But I will say that slap in the face and the admonition was a very good life lesson, because I always did learn to be very cautious and to measure my words and to think before I speak. And I see a lot of people around me that really could have used that slap in the face when they were kids from their mamas, to perhaps learn to think before they speak when they say things to other people, to be more respectful.
Teddy, I believe that you can manipulate.
There is no other way. Do you think that there's no other way to teach children to moderate things that they say, other than their mothers slapping them in the face? Because I certainly remember learning harsh childhood lessons that didn't require my parents hitting me.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I never learned a lesson from hitting, and I got plenty of that. But those aren't the things that I learned from, and those weren't the quote unquote punishments slash responses from my parents that I was afraid of. So I might talk about the things that I was really afraid of. But I can tell you, when you get a whipping 1 or 2 or 3 times a week with a belt, you just okay.
I think that is a good week.
That's the fee. I want to do this thing. That's the fee. I'm now big enough and tough enough. I can do it, and I'll pay the fee.
David, you remember my brother, I guess. Or, yeah, I don't know.
I've never actually met your psychopathic brother. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. So the only one. But
by the way, if he's listening to the podcast, I'm sorry I called you a psychopath. Please don't kill me.
So the thing that what you're saying there resonates with me. That the escalation of violence resonates with me because my brother was still living at home past 18 before he went into the military. And Dad was a corporal punishment guy, prior Navy, yada, yada, yada. And before my brother finally moved out for good, their physical confrontations evolved into fist fights.
Did you say fist fights?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yes. And the most prominent of which was out in the front yard. David, you'll remember the house. Out in the front yard for the neighbors to see. I don't know if any neighbors saw it. I'm not making any claims who did it, but it started inside. It moved outside the backyard, came around the house into the front. I mean, this was, I don't want to say it lasted long, but I hope if you're listening to this, you only take one piece of advice. Don't let your fights with your children turn into a contest of who's bigger and bad. That's not a parent. That's a bully. And if your child is not safe, hitting them doesn't make them safe. Unsafe, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that was a thing that I wanted to highlight. So I'm glad that you got there. Is the justification is often, I got to do this bad thing to you to keep something worse from happening to you. And generally, the worst thing that happens in that kid's life is you doing the bad thing to them. But it's if I don't do this bad thing now, you'll grow into something where a worse thing is done later. And I do think, since we've taken off the theological gloves, that a lot of this comes from religion, because God is gonna do this ultimate bad thing, or this bad thing called hell is gonna happen to you. And while you're burning in hell, you're gonna wish that somebody had beat you up a little bit. Because maybe that would have avoided this spot. This is kind of the justification for a lot of the early child abuse that happened earlier in the century, and that happened in the church quite a lot. It was extremely prevalent in Christian families in particular. And this justification is, if you love your child, you've got to beat them. You can't spare the rod with them, because a worse thing is going to happen to them if you don't. So if you don't do it, God is going to do it, because they're not going to learn their lessons. This is the kind of
Christian God. I mean, why does it have to be a family member? Is Islam correct? Is Buddhism correct? And which version of Christianity? Which God and which hell? I mean, the very fact that somebody close to you might tell you about hell doesn't at all indicate that it's the right version of hell, or that they know what they're talking about. So do we really have to open our children up to anybody that wants to make some, the fact that it's a loving member of the family gets you nowhere. It gets you nowhere.
And I don't want to lose the thread here. It's this idea that if you just hit your child, or burn your child with an iron, or do whatever it takes to your child today, that will save your child from something worse tomorrow. you are on a downward spiral, and the reason is there's always something worse down the road. There's always something worse, and so you can justify any amount of abuse with that reasoning. You are never going to abuse your child so bad that it's worse than the worst thing that you can imagine in your mind, and that's not a thing that's going to ever end well, and it's why this kind of punishment has been outlawed by and large everywhere. And so when you talk about, in your story, Teddy, once again, I'm not actually, this is a lot less judgmental than it sounds. So when you were talking about you started off spanking the child in diapers, by the way, they don't understand, but the swat with a hand, and then it gets harder, and then it gets harder, and then you get a cheese board, and what's next on the list? How far does it go before you realize?
But like I said, once he was not responding, so the cheese
well,
board's
but
like
there was
in
right, but there was an
out.
escalating point, and then you had enough governing in your own system to say, okay, I have to stop because this isn't working. What I'm saying is you have to do that anyway. You have to stop because it's never going to work. Ultimately, you can physically manipulate your kids to behave a certain way, kind of, sort of, sometime, but that's only going to work when they think they're going to get caught. So all you're actually doing is teaching them how to hide that behavior from you.
On a less obstinate child, it would have worked. It's just that
no. All you're doing is manipulating behavior. I can manipulate your behavior through various means of torture. I can turn you
to manipulate the behavior. My child was doing something.
I can turn you into anything I want to, given no conscience and unlimited means of torture.
What do you do when your child's doing something dangerous?
But the thing is, there are other ways for me to at least try to get you to do what I need you to do.
Can I ask you a question?
Done with a child that doesn't understand language yet.
Right. Well, hitting them is the worst thing that you want to do to a child who doesn't understand language.
What could I have done?
Here's what I do, and I wonder if this would have worked in your place, because while oppositional defiance disorder is not something diagnosed in children that are 2 or 3 or whatever, we certainly can have children that are being obstinate, right, without obstinacy, without some sort of defiance disorder. So my daughter is occasionally quite stubborn. Dave's been on the phone a time or two, and she's being stubborn. I haven't had to hit her to get her to stop. Now, sometimes I have to move her. Right? Pick her up, move her away from the stove. She wants to run back in the kitchen. Pick her up, move her away. We put a gate on the kitchen, right, for a while. So I'm just wondering, I mean, maybe if you lived next to a volcano, right? but was there some reason that ongoing reinforcement couldn't work? Because it works for my kid. And I'm not saying that my child is your child. So, this is not combative. At the moment, I can't guarantee that we'll get back there between us, because this is what we do. But is there some reason that reinforcement by moving the child wouldn't work?
It just wasn't. I mean, I kept moving him away. He'd go right back. And, and then.
Could you have repositioned the dangerous thing? Could the dangerous thing have been moved?
I mean, it's a big chair in the living room. And so, I mean, at that age, you're already moving around and changing so much of your house. It comes to a point where, come on, I'm not going to just completely.
Right. And this is where most parents would employ some type of timeout mechanism to put the child in a safe, the child in a safe place where there are no obstacles, where they can have time to emotionally calm down. I'm not trying to assess
Yeah.
the situation. I don't want you to get defensive because, like I said, I wasn't being judgmental in the first place. But I do want to address briefly your question of, well, what would you do? Because it seemed to be, pardon me, a bit of a petulant question suggesting, well, no one has any better solution than what I had. Well, stow the petulance. There are better solutions, and I don't necessarily have them, but I can tell you, having gone through 8 months of foster parenting training for the types of situations like that, there are other solutions. And you better know that there have to be other solutions, or else there would be no foster parents because they'd be all in jail. They simply could not devolve to the solution of physical violence in that situation, because every one of the kids in foster care are going to be doing a lot worse things than jumping from chairs. So I would simply implore you that if
I
you're
don't mean jumping from chairs. I mean jumping continuously,
okay,
not just on a
jumping
chair.
on furniture, great,
But I'm
bouncing.
talking about where it's like a
I know
trampoline.
what jumping is. I get
Yeah,
it.
my
They
daughter
do it
does.
on
Jumping
beds. They
from a chair.
Some kids are jumpers. I get it.
Well, my daughter is.
But
From a
every
narrow
day.
chair, you're
yeah,
going to easily
but
fall.
what I'm telling you,
Yeah.
that your fear of their falling is not actually neither legally nor, I would say, ethically an excuse for visiting violence on the child. Now, once again, I wasn't there. This was a long time ago. You have had the influences that brought you to that moment. I am honestly not judging you here, Teddy. I'm just saying, because it sounds like what you're saying is that's a good solution today that you recommend to other people. And
finally
that's
worked.
the thing that I'm addressing right now. It is not a good solution today. And there are things that we can do, and we have to think more creatively and more lovingly, and recognize that our fear of a bad thing is not a good excuse to then visit a bad thing on
Teddy,
a
what
person.
finally worked for your child?
I'm sorry?
I'm just curious. What
I'm sorry?
finally worked? What finally solved the problem?
To be honest, I don't remember with the whole chair situation.
You probably
I
just
get
grew
that.
out of it.
Something
I
happens and you move
remember,
on.
for example, with timeouts, my son wouldn't stay in timeout. So I had to stay and hold him in timeout.
Right.
But
Well,
then the
timeout for him is
problem-
timeout for you.
But then the problem was he liked me hovering over him in timeout. So then that wasn't a punishment either.
But that's the problem. It doesn't need to be a punishment. That's why I don't believe in punishment. If you're hovering over him helped him calm down, that's what you should do.
What we do
He
with
likes jerking me around. That's what this kid does.
what we do with my 2-year-old. I mean, look, every child is different. I didn't always believe that, right? But every child is different. So what we do with my 2-year-old is we take her chair. She's got a little table and chair. They're her size. I'm sure you've had the same kind of thing. Yeah. And we take her chair and we sit it in the laundry room. And we put her in the laundry room and close the door and start the timeout timer. Mm-hmm. Because she has the same, oh, look, mommy and daddy are both paying attention to me. That is exactly what I wanted, right? So we put her in the laundry room.
No, we did that. We did that for a while with putting him in his room where we had the little things over the doorknobs to where he couldn't open up the door. And so we started doing timeouts in his room because we realized that just putting him in the corner with me hovering over, he liked that. But then he started getting too big to where his hands were big enough and he figured out how to, well, actually at one point he just started pulling the doorknob cover off the doorknob. I was like, oh my goodness. So, I mean, it's just,
Look, none of this stuff is easy, but when we start mixing in philosophies from religions and ancient tribal thought and bringing it into the modern day. So I'm not even all that judgmental over the original tribal people who thought it was good advice to say, spare the rod, spoil the child. Okay. that's not where I am today, and they wouldn't make it in our society at all. But we're in our society and they're in theirs. When you try to blend that kind of thinking with the modern day understanding of the world that we have, that's where the problem comes in for me. And I think this is part of the problem of religion, especially fundamentalist religion, because it's the Jews and the Christians saying the God of the Old Testament really knew what he was doing. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. It's the idea of saying, yeah, when Paul told those women to be silent in church, he really knew what he was talking about. No, he didn't.
Like I've
Stop
heard
it. Stop it. And so we live in 2021 at the time of this recording. And I think both Andrew and I and Matt, when he was on, and even some Christians would say, look, as we understand the world better, it may make more sense to let some of the biblical understandings of how best to do things go. But the more fundamentalist you are, the less you are able to do that. And you are trying to recreate this biblical idea, this first century idea in the 21st century. And that just does not work. It is always bad. And this is one of the reasons why religion hanging on and trying to recreate itself and overlay itself on these modern times is dangerous, especially when it comes to child rearing, because almost everything the Bible had to say about child rearing is kind of awful.
So I just offer this in the best possible version of friendship that we have, which is pretty good. The defense that someone really believes that they should be able to teach a child something that is deeply committed to their heart, that they can't convince other adults of, especially if the other adult is reasonable by the usual lights that we judge reason, is deeply and troublingly flawed. And I don't care whether we're talking about religion or science. I don't care whether we're talking about economics or politics. If you and I can't agree on the truth of some proposition, that should give us the moment of pause to say, I shouldn't be trying to instill that in a child. And if, feel free to disagree with me, but if the listeners take any single message away from what I have said, that is it. I don't care what the subject is. If we can't come to a conclusion about it as rational adults, we certainly can't expect to make rational children. And I appreciate the fact that we got to chat as always. I look forward to getting to talk to you again.
Same here, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
Dave, that's all I got, man, unless you got something to say before I hit the big X.
Nope, not that. No,
All right,
it's a descent into madness from this point on.